Good evening. The board now reconvenes this meeting of the Plano ISD Board of Trustees in open session at 7:00 p.m. on March 14th, 2017 at the Plano ISD Administration Building. I'm Missy Bender, President of the Plano ISD Board of Trustees, and on the board's behalf, I wish to extend a warm welcome to all who are present and to our web and video viewers. Tonight, we will conduct our meeting focusing on the district's two major goals: ensuring the continued improvement in student learning and ensuring the efficient use of our resources. Let me begin by introducing my fellow trustees and staff. Seated to my left are Dr. Bingley, Superintendent of Schools, Nancy Humphrey, Board Vice President, Trustees Tammy Richards and David Stolley, Susan Modisette, Assistant Superintendent for Campus Services, Dr. Matthew Gutierrez, Assistant Superintendent for Employee Services, and Dr. Jim Wusso, Assistant Superintendent for Academic Services. Seated to my right is normally Carolyn Mobius, Trustee, Board Secretary. She's on her way back from Austin. We asked her to testify on a particular bill today, so that is something she's doing on our behalf. Trustees Marilyn Hinton and Dr. Yoram Solomon. Dr. Carrie Cooper, Assistant Superintendent for District Services. Steve Fortenberry, Chief Financial Officer. Dan Armstrong, Assistant Superintendent for Technology Services. Carla Oliver, Assistant Superintendent for Government, Community, and Planning Initiatives. And Denise Gillespie, our Executive Assistant to the Superintendent and Board of Trustees. I'd also like to thank members of our Multilingual Education Services Department for serving as greeters and for distributing the agendas and comment cards tonight. Please join us in applauding these staff members for their assistance this evening. At this time, Trustee Tammy Richards will share an inspirational message. Ms. Richards.
Thank you, Ms. Bender. I love this time of year when you see the daffodils blooming, the tulips, the redbud trees. It's a wonderful time of rebirth. So as we're experiencing this change from winter to spring, I invite you to think about our students who are also growing and flourishing as they are approaching the end of their school year. As we're fully into the second semester, it's my hope that each child has grown in their academic achievements and that they are excited about learning. Spring brings with it a shared feeling of hopefulness and excitement. May our students be hopeful, excited about learning, and welcoming of this season that highlights their accomplishments during this year in PISD. A quote attributed to Ralph Waldo Emerson is, "Earth laughs in flowers," a very joyous thought. May we joyously celebrate our children as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. Will you all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We will now move on to the recognition part of our agenda. Ms. Oliver, do we have any student guests that we can recognize this evening?
We do, thank you. We have Boy Scout Troop number 999, if you would stand to be recognized. All three of them. Thank you and welcome to the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Oliver. Now, it's my pleasure, on behalf of the board, to take a moment to applaud the Communications Department for their Crystal Commendation Award from the Texas School Public Relations Association, earned for the 2016 bond election campaign. Statewide, only one Crystal Commendation is awarded per category for a multifaceted promotional program or campaign employing a variety of media, occurring over a period of time, and encompassing well-defined goals, strategies, or activities. We understand as well that many additional Plano ISD projects were awarded with Gold, Silver, and Bronze Star Awards for 2015-16. So please join me, and first of all, if you're in the Communications Department, please stand, and Jonathan, Bill.
Yeah, Bill is in the booth.
Brittany, everybody here, thank you. We ask a lot from your department, and you do a lot, and you obviously do it very well. So congratulations. we're very proud of that award that you've earned. Now I will invite Dr. Jim Wisso, the Assistant Superintendent for Academic Services, to introduce the recognition of our stellar Fine Arts Department. Dr. Wisso.
Thank you, President Bender. Given that March is the month that we celebrate the arts nationally on many levels, it's with great pleasure, and given that we have one of the finest arts programs in all its forms in Plano ISD in the state, and I'd say in the nation, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Kathy Cuttis to the podium to share a few words and celebrations about our arts program.
Thank you. Thank you, President Bender, Dr. Bingley, staff and guests. On behalf of the staff and teachers and students of the Fine Arts Department, I want to thank you for this opportunity to share with you and with our community just a few quick words about our program and their impact as we kick off March, which is Youth Art Month, Music in Our Schools Month, and Theater for Life Month around the nation. A very special thank you to Marlon Flores from Frankford Middle School. Marlon shared his rendition of Bach's First Cello Suite from memory, you might have noticed, in the lobby prior to this evening's meeting. The Texas Cultural Trust recently released their annual State of the Arts report, and included in this document are the results of a statewide survey of parents. Here are just a few of the key findings. 92% of Texas parents have a positive opinion of arts education. 95% of Texas parents believe the arts should be taught in the Texas public schools. And 85% of Texas respondents agreed that arts education should be included at every grade level. 89% of Texas respondents believed that art and music electives are as important as athletics in middle school and high school. 74% of parents report that art was one of the classes their child looked forward to at school. And 9 out of 10 Texas parents support increased funding for Texas arts education. An analysis of the TCA research in 2015 also demonstrated that students in districts that met state accountability standards had more than twice the unique arts courses to choose from and earned up to 26% more arts credits than students in districts needing improvement. The secondary schools that met the state accountability standard offered 50% more unique arts courses on average than schools needing improvement. And middle school and high schools in districts that met the state accountability standards offered more than twice as many unique arts courses on average than schools in districts needing improvement. We know that changes to the state accountability system are coming, and that the current plan places little if no emphasis on the availability, much less the quality or diversity of arts courses being offered in Texas schools. We are most grateful to you as our leaders in Plano ISD to have taken an active role in supporting access to a robust and varied arts curriculum at all levels. Thank you. According to the TCA report, employment in what they refer to as the creative sector, that is jobs relying heavily on critical thinking, innovation, and creativity, currently represent 1 in 15 positions, and this sector is projected to increase 20% by 2024. In their 2017 survey, 92% of all respondents agreed that creativity and innovation are important skills. Work in this creative sector is highly lucrative. The TCA reports that 1/4 of these jobs reside here in the North Texas area and represent more than 200,000 positions with an average salary of $81,000 per year. 78% of all parents responding to the TCA survey indicated they would encourage their child to take more arts courses upon learning that creative occupations pay significantly more than some other jobs. The current year Plano ISD initiatives state a focus on closing the opportunity and achievement gaps through pervasive learner-focused support, and on building support and valuing an innovative, learning and mission-driven organizational culture. I'd like to share just a few ways in which our department and our programming are working to support these initiatives. Just in the past months, we have successfully leveraged partnerships with several of our local community arts organizations to directly close the opportunity gap for music students through 3 specific programs. First, for the second year in a row, the Plano Community Band has brought their Music for Life program to 2 of our Title I middle school band programs. This year, these high-performing local musicians visited Frankfurt and are actually at Armstrong Middle School as we speak tonight. They learn the UIL repertoire being prepared by the school band and spend an afternoon working with them in sectionals and giving a side-by-side concert for the parents. Then these students are their special guests at the community band's concert, their spring concert, and hear their pieces performed by the community band under the direction of their school directors. The Plano Symphony Orchestra, as you may have heard, has recently announced their new scholarship program to provide a year of private lessons for at least 5 deserving economically disadvantaged instrumental students in our public schools. And the Men of Note, a local men's chorus, have done the same for a young male singer in our schools for this spring. We currently offer more than 100 diverse artistic elective courses for high school students to choose from. In addition to the advanced placement 2D, 3D, studio, art history, and music theory courses, we also offer students at the IB World School the opportunity to take visual art, dance, or theater as part of their program. Some of the newest additions to our course offerings are the Art and Media Communications courses, which allow students the opportunity to bridge traditional art skills with new technology applications through guided explorations into contemporary practices across the visual and commercial arts fields. We have recently rewritten our basic music theory curriculum to reflect the broadened scope of the revised TEKS, which offers students opportunities to listen to, analyze, perform, and create music from various styles, genres, and we have renamed this course Music Studies to better reflect the content. Next year, we will offer a musical theater elective at our senior high schools for the first time. This course is a cross-disciplinary offering to provide support for students who wish to refine their abilities and combine the skills of acting, singing, and dancing in their creative work. We continue to refine and develop our program offerings to support the latest and innovative best practices in arts education to develop skilled, creative problem solvers and risk takers to contribute to our community and beyond. Each of us work actively to recruit and retain the best teachers in our respective fields. And I would like to take a moment to thank our centralized fine arts team, Laura Grundler, our visual art coordinator, Jeremy Condrad, our instrumental music coordinator, and Greg, our theater arts coordinator, for their great work supporting these programs. March is a very busy month for our arts educators, and many of them are with students tonight as we meet. But I would like to ask any of you, any of our fine arts teachers who were able to be here tonight to stand and let us thank you as well for your work in the classrooms. Up you go, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. I could stand here all night and share the great work of our our students and staff, but in the interest of my time and yours, I will spare you that tonight. So we have prepared once again our annual brag book for you with some of the latest news about our programs and the accolades that they have received, both at the group level and at the individual level, staff and students. We hope that you'll take a moment to review the successes of recent months. You might have even seen some things in this week's e-news. Finally, just a simple word of thanks to each of you and to our wonderful community for your ongoing support of great arts education that makes a difference in the lives and futures of the students of Plano ISD. Thank you all very much.
Any comments from board members?
Go ahead.
I just want to offer my thanks as well. Both of my children benefited from arts programs in Plano, my daughter in dance and my son in music. And I want to give a shout out to Mr. Preston Pierce, who is the jazz band director at Plano West, taking his students to the essentially Ellington competition in New York. Only 15 jazz bands across the nation were selected. It's not only the learning of the music, it's the teamwork, it's the camaraderie, it's the lifelong friendships. When my son comes home from college, the kids he hangs around with are the band kids. And so I want to thank you all for creating that type of community.
So if you have not had a chance to look at this, and I know many people have not, try and get your hands on one, because it doesn't take very long to page through this to see some impressive statistics. And I would go to page 1. In the AP Arts category, we had 724 AP exams administered. And to say that we are one of the best in the country, this is the evidence. Our 3 senior highs are 1st, 2nd, and 6th in the state of Texas in passing scores, and ranked 2nd, 4th, and 22nd nationally. That's amazing. And when you say we are one of the best, here's the evidence. And so congratulations to you guys, not only for this, but for all of what you've created and all of what our students do. And you know, the last thing in that same category, the whole myth of the starving artist, which I know is not a myth all the time, but there were $10 million in scholarships earned by students. That comes out with the number of students who receive scholarships. With that number across the district is 35,000 on average, and that's real money for real education and real progress.
David, you didn't point out that they passed that AP exam at a 91% passing rate. That's money in their parents' back pocket when they go to college, because that AP exam counts for college credit. So they're that much further ahead in pursuing and finishing college. So that's a good point that you brought out all these stats. And I was a band mom, and you know, there's nothing to deny how much fun that is, and what the kids learn, and the camaraderie, and the trips they take, everything. It's more than just being in a band class. So thank you.
Well, I just want to say that my children were not very involved in the fine arts department, but my husband is an avid fan, and so we go to more concerts now, and we go to more choral things throughout the entire district than I've ever been to. And it's been really good, because now I don't have to worry about the kids or whatever. We just have a good time and go. So thank you for having this for the community as well as for the kids.
I wanted to add something, Kathy. The fifth grade music day that you hold, I think plays a big role in the enrollment that we have, and then the fact we make it mandatory in 6th grade, I think is very important. You talked about creative jobs, and something that's important is that music plays on a very certain area of the brain, and that area is responsible for creativity, not just the type of creativity that we looked at the slides, the creativity of music and dance, and it's the type of creativity that's needed in any business. There's a book called "This Is Your Brain on Music" that I think is an important read. But I managed to get one of my daughters through the entire the entire program. She's graduating from Plano West this year, doing orchestra for all those years. So the other one, not so much, didn't want to. But it's important, it's critical, and it's not only for starving artists, it's for successful business people too. So thank you.
So I'll wind this up. You know that we are big fans of the fine arts, and that's not new. I think the boards over time have consistently demonstrated the value that we place in the fine arts instruction and the options that students have, because we want everybody to find their place. And there are so many of our students who find their place here. That's one point I'll make. The other point is that the quality of what we do in fine arts, so I'm a choir mom, and I was a choir kid here too. But, so going to all of these competitions and the all-state process and the UIL process, we rock it all across the board. So just, not only are we offering great chances, choices for kids, we're providing great quality of the experience and instruction. So I think that our community values that. And I'm hopeful that we'll talk about legislative stuff later in the meeting, but as we work to put together our own scorecard about how are we doing, how we do on these kinds of things matters. So congratulations on Fine Arts Month.
Can I share a thought? Ms. Bender talked about the things the community values, and I'll give a shout out that goes to two directions. Greg, you're gonna love hearing this. So I'm speaking to Kiwanis, right? And we started talking about RSVP, which is we started last year for our senior citizens to stay connected to our schools. Now we have over 1,000. There were 4 card-carrying members at the Kiwanis breakfast. And so one of them explained to the fellow Kiwanis individuals that he could use that, and he took his grandson to In the Heights. And he just started telling everybody in that room, you can't believe the talent of those kids. I just said, let me drink some coffee, you go ahead and preach on it. And so I want to tell you that these were citizens, and maybe for the first time came into our programs and couldn't stop talking about what our kids were doing and the quality of that. So thank you for that.
Okay. All right, we will conclude that topic and move forward to our introduction of public comments. So thank you. For the public comment portion of our agenda, the board has public comment cards that are accepted from 6 to 7 p.m. Cards are not accepted after 7 p.m. and are not transferable to other parties or speakers. All cards will be collected and given to Carla Oliver or a representative of the Communications Department who will present the speakers during this time. Ms. Oliver, do we have any speakers for public comment?
We don't.
Okay.
Agenda or non-agenda.
Okay, thank you. Having no speakers at this time, we will now consider the consent agenda. This includes personnel recommendations, minutes of previous meetings, bids, purchases, and construction items. Are there any requests to remove an item or items from the consent agenda for further discussion? If none, do I have a motion to approve as presented? Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes unanimously. We don't have anybody to introduce. Okay. All right, so now we will move to items for discussion and action that require a decision. We will begin with item A, and Ms. Modisette will make the recommendation, please.
Thank you, President Bender. Please consider the recommendation for approval.
So just so I can be specific, do we need to be specific, Denise?
If you would please read the agenda.
Okay, so it is the recommendation to approve the proposed settlement agreement and release with Berkeley Public Entity Managers through Gemini Insurance Company regarding the identified claimant. Student 1 is presented. Do I have a motion to approve the following recommendation? Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We have an additional item regarding possible action and approval of a settlement agreement with an identified special education student. Ms. Monset.
Thank you, President Bender. Again, I would ask you to please consider the recommendation for approval.
Okay. So approving the proposed settlement agreement with the identified special education student. Number 1 is presented. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Yes. Do I have a second? Second. Thank you. All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, next agenda item is regarding consideration and possible action regarding approval of settlement agreement and release with Berkeley Public Entity Managers through Gemini Insurance Company regarding the identified claimant, student number 2. Ms. Modisette.
I would ask that you consider the recommendation for approval.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second? All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, that concludes the actions on those items. We're now going to listen to Dr. Wusso present the Secondary Academy Committee finding and its recommendations. This will conclude with a recommendation for programming. Dr. Wusso, please.
Thank you, President Bender. Okay, we got the slides there. Okay, it's my pleasure then to share with you this evening the work, several months' work of the Secondary Academy Advisory Committee. Just to remind you that the charge of this group was to explore the Academy offerings and really the programming for this Academy that targeted high skill and high demand occupations, especially those that do not require a 4-year college degree. And I'm pointing this in the wrong direction. We had a 21-member committee made up of staff members and community members. I'd like to take this point in the presentation to ask if, because I can see several out in the audience, if you were part of this, one of these 21 members, if you would stand to be recognized for your contributions to this work. So again, we had 7 meetings spanning from December through February. And this slide summarizes really the information inputs that were considered by this group over that course of the meetings. The first thing, and you actually have a copy of this on your agenda table if you want to refer to that, just to remind you that in October, prior to us starting this committee work, you created the High School Academy Programs Guiding Principles. So that was one of the foundational documents that we used to frame the scope of this work. So I think you'll find as we go through and summarize the work and the recommendations that we're bringing forward, these very much parallel and match the elements in those guiding principles. In addition to that, we spent time, because we currently have a very expansive CTE programming at our various schools, we spent quite a bit of time investigating and kind of informing the committee members what do we currently have in place and what are our plans for our existing programs. Then I'd say the other big piece of work was using various sources of data, but primarily the Interlink report, which is an agency that works with school districts in north central Texas, that really looks at labor market trends, that looks at growth occupations, very much giving us valuable information. We had see David in the group right now, but I want to say the detail of the document was probably over 400 pages of detailed statistics and trending data and just an enormous wealth of data. So it was really trying to go through that and look for trends that emerged, and again looking for the areas that specifically met this charge. And I'd say one of the things that we kept circling back in this work was on that area of, it didn't mean that students that participate in these programs wouldn't go on to other forms of education beyond this programming, but specifically saying in our launch of this, we wanted to focus on potential careers that didn't necessarily require 4 years of college. So this data was invaluable to help us shape these lists and these focus areas that we came up with those criteria. In addition, we had the ability, and really we did this virtually, not through actual site visits, but we had two good models that we probably relied upon more heavily. One program in Waco ISD and one in Red Oak that had many of the attributes that we were looking potentially to mirror in Plano. So to jump right then into the first area for recommendations that the group came up with, were identifying 4 focus areas for programming. And I'd pay a special attention to these categories, and we spent even a fair amount of time with various groupings as to what categories made sense. And as you look at the detail there, and this first one on construction technology, some of those you could say, well, some of those could fit in a different category, and that's very much the case. So there is some arbitrary nature to this in terms of, and say potentially what category it fell. However, all of these areas, excuse me, again, fit this criteria of things that we know are again, through Interlink data and the other data that we researched, these are growing, emerging fields that at the present time, and I'm sure everyone's watched the news about the projected growth in Collin County alone over the next 10 years. I'd say we can, and we had say a fair amount of conversation. I'm looking at some of the members in the audience. A fair amount of conversation about even what label we put on these. So I wouldn't say we're too attached. Some of these were compromise names because some of these areas might go by different names in different sources. But I think there was universal agreement on these are the areas that make sense for us to start, and that we can get a good, healthy start for students in these careers to really understand what these careers are about, potentially get an associate's degree with maybe another year of school after they leave us in high school. So these 4 areas of construction technology, advanced manufacturing, information technology, and finally logistics and supply chain management. So those are the areas that emerged out of literally hundreds of potential occupations. Those are the areas that are the focus areas. In addition to that, and this I'd say also came from the Interlink work, one of the things that we realized through conversation was that it was the authentic experience that's part of the programming that's an essential component of a successful academy as well. So one of the things that we invested time in was developing, I put it here on one slide just so that you could see the breadth of this, and you've got this, the detail in the report. You might be able to see the detail easier than on the slide. But the idea is that these are in-demand entry-level skills. We purposely didn't want to call them soft skills, and you hear these again, labeled a variety of things, but a lot of conversation that this is an essential component, that these attributes, these qualities, these skills, these practices be interwoven in a meaningful way in all the programs, regardless of what specialization students go into. So I think this is also an important piece of the work that this committee is recommending. Much like the findings and directions that we created for the Academy High School, this is kind of the visioning work that then sets the stage for, it becomes our charge to say, how do we execute this through the programming that we create. So I'd say another key piece of the work were these in-demand workplace skills. And then finally, this idea of knowing that we have to have effective partnerships with industry and higher education, also a critical piece of this. And so we spent, again, a good bit of time identifying to the various audiences. So I'll just use this first one to just go through it, an example. So these partnerships with industry and higher ed are effective for the Academy because they give industry a voice in that. In certain ways, it provides us with industry expertise, which we know is necessary. It provides opportunities for students to participate directly with those businesses, and then as well as teachers. So we know that having qualified a teaching force to execute these programs will be an essential part of that. So unless we have effective partnerships, not only with higher ed, but with industries, and in an ongoing way. So again, this whole idea of partnerships, it's good for industry. As we summarize, it's good for higher education as well. So all the stakeholders in this relationship will benefit from these interactions. So, with the exception of this slide, the previous report, the previous slides really summarize the work of the Academy, of this Academy Advisory Committee. And maybe before I go into say these next steps, I'd say the kind of the recommendation or the action part of this, following whatever question and discussion you might have, would be that you would officially support and endorse the findings and directions of this committee as a foundation and a framework for next steps. And again, this is very much parallel to the process that we did with Academy High School. So what I'm suggesting then really is kind of next steps. We have already been in conversations with Collin College about a regional consortium, a consortium of districts in the North Texas area. They actually have some land on the bond proposition in May. And so we didn't get into where, at this point, how we would offer this programming, but the idea would be part of this could be potentially executed through a regional cooperative. Some areas we might choose to go alone in partnership with Collin College or another institution of higher ed. So probably the second thing I have listed there, again, much like we did with the Academy High School, using that as hopefully a successful model of implementation, was that you would allow us to, or you would commission a steering committee that would then turn the work that we presented to you tonight into more actionable steps. So we would develop timelines, we'd develop budgets, we'd have subcommittees on that steering committee that flesh out the details that it would take to execute a project of this scope. And I'd say something else that's come together fairly recently, and this was something we investigated in the process, is the value, because we know that a formal advisory committee, and when I say an advisory committee for the academy, it would be, again, a committee much like the partnership we talked about. They would have representative businesses, higher education, as well as district staff members. But the value in potentially connecting that to a national organization that provides structure and support. So National Academy Foundation, for example, is one that's a national group. We actually visited with them a couple of weeks ago, and we think there might be some good value add if we joined an organization like that to help provide structure and connections, because a lot of this is going to be about connections to business and industry and other school entities that have already been down this path. We're not the first to blaze this trail, so we want to take advantage of lessons learned. So we think potentially joining a professional network like this could be to our advantage. So with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Well, I have a couple of, boy, this microphone situation, we need another one.
Need one right here.
I know, right there and right there. I'm gonna lean in. Thank you for this report. I'm excited to hear the work that we've done on this. I think this is an exciting opportunity to offer our students. I think that there are so many employers that are looking for high skills in their jobs that are high demand jobs, and if we don't offer it to our students, the employers are going to find it, and it may not be in Texas. So we need to answer the call of that growth that you're talking about, and I'm all in favor of this academy. And I sat on the subcommittee of the board and worked with David and Yoram to come up with the little guiding principles. But a couple of things I want to point out is there are several bills right now in the legislature that do point directly to giving incentives for districts to offer CTE courses like this. So I think that we want to perhaps advocate for those bills to get through the process. I'm very pleased to see the in-demand workplace skills, sometimes referred to as soft skills, as a driving component in this, because I think those are relevant for any job a child has or a student has. And one of the things, I think I gave you information on a career school that's located in Mesa, Arizona, East Valley Institute of Technology. I heard the superintendent of that organization at a recent conference I was at, and one of the things that we don't list in here as a benefit, let's see, the things effective partnerships with industry will provide for the academy. One of the big things is underwriting, and so I think we might want to list that in here, because she said that in her district they have lots of underwriting from industries because they see the benefit of investing in these schools and seeing the students that become their employees. One question that I have is, how will our academy offerings impact what we currently offer our students in the district? Because I know, for instance, we have an HVAC program at Plano East. Would that remain there?
Areas like, and I'd say I'd use HVAC maybe as one, or welding as another. In part of our analysis with, I think what we're looking at is, so the short answer is we're not sure what
Okay.
might happen with some of those, but we think the risk reward benefit is we see something on a much larger scale. So some of these things that we might be doing at a micro level, we want to take to a macro level. So it could mean that we need, and I think that's, again, I think that's parallel with the guiding principles. There's some things we may adjust in our existing practice if we need to scale that, efficiencies of scale, or to offer programming that, so if we're gonna have those things campus-based, continue to have, we can't have the same kind of program we could offer in
Right.
in a program like this. So we think there's And I don't want to over-speak that one. I don't know that we had that much conversation
Okay.
as a
That's to be
committee
determined,
about that.
yeah.
But I'd say internally, we've looked at some of those opportunities where there are probably many of these areas that we touch on in a small way.
Mhm.
That's very different than having a specialization and a focus where you can have 4 or 5 courses that build expertise, that lead to certification, that lead to apprenticeships. So this is a kind of specialization in these things. Even if we have things that touch on these, we don't approach that now in our program. Not to
Okay.
take anything away from our program.
No, not at
but
all.
it's a different kind of experience.
Okay, and the last thing, and I'll leave it alone, I just would like to emphasize that I would love to see the program offer as many certifications as possible, and I appreciate that another semester, maybe 2 semesters of secondary education would get them an associate's degree. So those are the kinds of things that I think were part of our priority list in this work. But thank you.
So, Jim, one of the things that you mentioned, and I think probably which segues naturally what Nancy was mentioning, is with regard to certifications. And so, was the conversation more towards saying, okay, let's focus this more on career, on really what would traditionally be called CTE, but really career oriented, or were there conversations of having something more akin to like the Health Sciences Academy, which can be both career oriented or for the short term certification, where a path where you can go on to College, get a certificate, get a job at 19 or 20 years old, or if your chosen path is a 4-year degree or medical school or something like that, that there's an option, that there are options for that as well. Were there any conversations with regard to that type of flexibility in this academy, or is it really more career oriented?
Yeah, yes, to the extent, and I was trying, as you were mentioning that, I was trying to think of a specific example, but yes, there were conversations around that, but also with the idea that the two pathways that you described aren't really mutually exclusive.
Right.
So we wanted as much flexibility for certifications, if that made sense for a student. Also, and I'd say we probably talked about it more from multiple entry points. So one of the other advantages of having this in a centralized location is that by having all those things, even in physical proximity, you think about a student starting in this, and so probably a lot of this is specialization that starts maybe in 10th grade, but 11th and 12th grade. So it might be that you start in something and you go like, you're kind of see, what are they doing over there? I kind of like that better. So it might be that we want students to be able to enter into this as early as possible, possibly second semester of 10th grade, but probably more in 11th and 12th grade. But it might be that some that say, I'm going to take other courses, and then in the 11th grade I'm going to do this because I want to get these certifications. So a lot of it is how we, and again, to me it's that kind of detail that the steering committee will work through the logistics to say, how can we optimize this to provide multiple pathways? But I'd say at the same time, probably our biggest need that's unmet right now is really a career focus, that we have enough time to take a sequence of things in depth that a student could step out of Plano ISD and be employed in that field.
Yeah, and I think to me, that's one of the things I really like about the Health Sciences Academy, is that it is set up so that you could step out very quickly and have a very nice paying job at 19 years old. You can have an associate's degree, you can have a career. And then if you decide to go back to school later, you can. But something like this, I could see a student who might be their path, where they want a career and this is a good way to go and get a certification early. Or I could also see something like this for somebody who's interested in engineering and who thinks perhaps maybe getting a certification might help a college application, or who might just see these particular types of classes as something that might help in an engineering field. And so I think I hope we are mindful of multiple paths like that as y'all go through the process.
Jim, if I could, it seems to me there's a lot of not only in-rolls but off-ramps. We get certification, and some go certification on to work, others certification on to college. And the other piece of this too, when you have the triumvirate of higher ed, industry, and K-12, there's another benefit in that oftentimes, and in this case perhaps the same facility, these young people may leave the K-12 setting, go to work for the very people who are helping build content at the community college level. They're sending them right back to literally the same place because they help build the skill set that buys another level of success in that organization. So it has those kind of opportunities as well if we all come to the table and think it through.
So, I have a few anecdotal comments, but one that's more fundamental. First of all, when I looked at it, and that's, I asked for the charter that we actually created at the subcommittee to be part of this. What I really wanted is, especially that part that's called the guiding principles, to be part. I mean, when I look at the recommendation, I see the Plano ISD vision, the Plano ISD mission, and the Plano ISD secondary academy advisory committee charge that has one sentence. We created a document. There is a part there that's called the guiding principles. I went through the recommendation. I don't see mention of some of the things that are there, and they may be implied, but I don't see them mentioned. In some of them, I have some concern. You already mentioned land somewhere, and there is a pretty specific statement that we made, and I remember at the subcommittee we talked about that quite a bit, that an academy program may be but need not be in a self-contained physical location. So we need to think beyond that. We talked about the accessibility to students in all of our current high schools and all of our feeder systems. I know that using Interlink is very local, but we're thinking in terms of our students would most likely stay in North Texas, and therefore we're probably not going to offer something like a ski resort management program, certification program, because we don't have snow here in Texas. But we have to keep in mind that our students are going to spread around, and so we may want to think beyond what's available in North Texas. As I mentioned, the more fundamental comment is I would like to see in the recommendation, or the recommendation itself, not only include the guiding principles that we created, because those are the real charter. It's not that one statement that says explore academy offering to provide specialized instruction in targeted high skill. That's one paragraph. I'd like to see that guiding principle included and reconciled. So there are areas that I saw there that I could not find in the document, and they may be implied, they may be kind of at the second level of detail, but I'd like to see that reconciliation before at least I can support moving forward with this, because then there is somewhat of a disconnect between what we actually worked and chartered the subcommittee with and what the recommendation is.
Yeah, let me respond to that in this way. I believe that if your question, your comment is you think there are areas that are in the directions and findings. So I would maybe I'd ask for this clarification. Do you see items in the report as it exists now that are in conflict with the guiding principles? So that would be the first step. And then I'd say, by design, because we had a very aggressive time frame. We were literally meeting 2 hours a night, once a week. So we thought we had a pretty time-packed charge to bring this back. So that was but to me, some of the next steps, some of the other areas of guiding principles, I would agree, were not addressed. That to me is the next step of work with the steering committee. So some of the guiding principles are more actionable. Some are more, say, broader in scope or more visionary. So what we tried to do was to make sure that in the scope of work that we did around, because our primary focus was on what focus areas, what offerings, And then we call them processes and procedures. What processes and procedures, what programming elements did we feel were universal and important? And that's what resulted in that list of in-demand workforce skills. And then the whole relationship with a broader advisory committee. That was that relationship piece. So I'd say if we missed the mark, that was my fault. If I didn't realize that the intent on this stage of the work was to include all of the elements of the guiding principles. I feel confident as we progress through the work, we'll reconcile all those. That's a framing document, but this was kind of stage one of the work that lays the foundation for the next steps that are more operational.
So, to answer that, I didn't see anything that specifically conflicts with anything in the guiding principles. What I saw more was that they were not addressed, or many of them were not addressed. I'm not saying that the plan will not address it. I'm hopeful that it would, but I think that as you start the recommendation with, we're going to refer to the Plano ISD vision as the top document, the Plano ISD mission. The Secondary Academy Advisory Committee charge, I think, should include that document from the board, or that part of the document from the board that says these are the guiding principles. Because otherwise, what I'm afraid is, just as this was initially presented to the board without this document, and this is when we start creating the disconnect. This document gets lost, and I don't want it to be lost as the work continues to progress with the advisory committee. We always need to go back to this. And when I say reconcile, I'm open not only to reconciling and showing how this plan at any stage complies with everything here. I'm open to say, bullet number 4, we are not sure we can address this, and bring it back to us and say, we can't address bullet number 4. We'll look at it as a board and say, we're okay without it. But right now, we are kind of putting that document apart, and it starts drifting away from the work that's continuing, and I think it needs to be embedded here. And whether everything at this level can be reconciled or will be reconciled in the future or negotiated in the future should be at least identified.
So Jim, let me say, if I hear you correctly, I think what you're, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you put together a package, okay, that includes some programs, that you're looking at for this particular community, but in the interest of all of our students, that we're also looking at those programs on a global level. If they should want to take some of those programs and go to Europe or to China and do them, they could do that as well. So we're both looking at, but we have to start somewhere with just some programs. We can't do everything. So we're taking some programs and making them fit our community and what we need here, and then maybe as well take them globally. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, I'd certainly say that I don't think there's let me respond to that. In that and maybe the thing to emphasize. So first of all, let me respond to you, connect this and respond to Yorm's question. I have no problem in including the guiding principles. I think that would be a good addition to add that to the official report. Okay, so taking that as a step, maybe in response to the scope of this, I'd have to say, if anything, I was concerned about the scope that we bit off for the first step. So I would say we have a history and a tradition in our district. When we do something, we want to do it right the first time. So I'd say another way to look at this list of focus areas, and that was even the way that it was presented, this is a starting place. Doesn't mean that over time this wouldn't evolve and grow, but one of the things I think that's important and critical to remember, it doesn't limit you to take, you have portability. If you develop these skills and these assets and these credentials, you have the ability to take those as an individual anywhere the marketplace But for us to start a program and have a successful program that has those, embeds those into, this can't be an online study, this can't be a book study, this has to be an authentic experience. And for us to do that robustly, we have to have industry partners right here to be able to provide those kind of experiences. So that was probably the limiting factor, starting, I don't know, I think we were fairly aggressive in not even starting that small. We've got 4 pretty large areas, but we had to think about, we've got to be able to execute this and execute it well. So not only are we learning how this interaction works we're learning of how we grow this over time. So I'd say don't take any of this. This is the first step that we're recommending. It's not the complete process even. As I was trying to mention, we really need a steering committee to flesh this out to make this actionable. So I would, again, ask if, even as a process step, if with the addition of the guiding principles, could we accept that then we accept this work as stage 1, step 2 is the steering committee, which then takes this to much more detail.
Absolutely. I have no problem approving. Well, what I see here, I like what I see here. We're not going to have a ski resort management program. That's fine. But we can't have the disconnect. You have embedded the vision, the mission. I do think that the guiding principles need to be part of it. So as you continue, because you're going to take this report, and this report is going to be the foundation to the next piece of work, and now we're 2 steps away from what the guiding principles are, unless they are embedded. So when I asked for it before the board meeting, really that's what I meant, and maybe I wasn't clear that I expected the guiding principles to be part of it, so we can, as we move along, be able to reconcile, and not for it to be sent separately. It needs to be part of it, because that's what the subcommittee really chartered the advisory committee with.
Point taken.
So I would reflect on the report as similar in nature to the work leading up to the development of Academy High School. So, after we did that, which was following kind of a similar process as we followed here, we had the experience with the Health Sciences Academy, which was different, and the board said, we want to have an experience like the Academy High School development experience. So in that vein, I view this as, you call it part 1, I'll call it phase 1, phase A or something like that. The board can buy into the thought process and the next steps here, because then following that buy-in, then we can release them to select a steering committee. And if it's similar to what happened, I recall, on the Academy High School, it's people with certain skill sets and experiences. It's not a large group of people. It's small enough, nimble enough, knowledgeable enough to roll their sleeves up and develop what I'll call sort of as the implementation of how we operationalize these things. And I think your questions will be certainly addressed at that time and reconciled with the points that you've made. So that's kind of how I see it. Question about where is it located. There may be one place for some things. There may be lots of places for other things. It's a matter of, we just don't know the answers to those questions yet. But I think it's good if we can buy into the work to date and release them to continue.
So let me,
I have a few comments, sorry. I don't know which one I can use. I was enthusiastic about the work that was done, and I appreciate that. I think I was somewhat hesitant to go along with such a strongly worded recommendation about accepting these findings and moving on that strongly, because I do think we're still in the time period of learning. I would have questions. For example, it's been an important guiding principle, although not articulated in that document, not to take choices out of our 3 comprehensive high schools. It's something where I think Dave and I both have felt strongly about in the past, and correct me if I'm wrong, where we have these large high schools, and so we don't want to take choices away from them. So for example, even we did the academy, the Health Science Academy, we kept clinical rotations at our 3 comprehensive senior high schools. And so I would want to see a blend of that. I also, from a business development point of view, would like to know how many students are really interested in this programming. Of our 4,000 graduating seniors a year, how many do we think would take advantage of this? So what type of surveying have we done to really understand what the true need is? On the flip side, I'd like to know how many students this program could actually support. I attended one of the meetings where the discussion was held on Waco ISD. That's actually a multi-district program as well. And what they shared, if I'm remembering the numbers correctly, is that only 40 seniors and 40 juniors were in that program per year. And they were in half-day programs. So half the day they'd be there at the academy, the other half they'd be in their traditional academic classrooms. That's not a lot of kids. And so I want to ensure that we build something that meets whatever our demand is. And we're also very, very thoughtful about the cost per child educated. Whenever we do these academies, we always have an increased cost per child. I mean, the Academy High School is that way. All the academies, I think, will be that way to some degree. I want to ensure that we're not, doubling or tripling the cost that we would spend on an individual student through this programming. So I'm enthusiastic about the study. I just feel a little hesitant to say that we're accepting this specific recommendation, knowing that we have a number of unanswered questions in this area.
I'd like to maybe at this point make a motion. We can always continue, I guess, the discussion. First of all, I wanted to thank the work of the committee, and I appreciate the amount of work that went into this. I don't find anything that I object to in this document. I'm not sure that came across. So the motion I would like to make, you're asking us to adopt the recommendation. I would like to move to adopt the committee's recommendation with the addition of the guiding principles that were approved by the board as part of it.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any other discussion?
Is it possible to amend that motion to indicate that this is phase one of a study? That if, as we proceed further into the study, if we find either cost issues or demand issues, that we don't move forward without further information?
Okay, do you have suggested language?
Oh, that's always the hard part.
Adopt the recommendation with the addition of the guiding principles.
It'd be along the lines, and this is not the right word, but sort of the codicil that as future study is done, we will continue to assess the viability of the academies. Sort of that's what I'm thinking.
So that would be a friendly amendment.
A friendly amendment, yes.
Okay, is the friendly amendment accepted?
Yes.
Okay. Any other discussion? All right, all in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Okay. All right, so we will then look forward to, at a future date, you'll let us, so Jim, let us know if you need anything from the board for this steering committee that you're going to put together. If not, then we'll look forward to hearing back at a future point in time what your moving forward recommendations look like.
Can I also quickly say thank you to the folks on the committee and also in some of the dialogue here. I really do appreciate not only, I mean, you all attack some of the competencies and the skills, and when I look at these organizational skills, we just sent something, Matt and I co-authored a little thing that went out to all of our principals and our leaders, and we're going to be dealing with it tomorrow morning at Sockla, and it's about how schools are innovative and future focused, and what you saw was these things: adaptability, creativity, teamwork. And then I would submit to you that's preparing young people for jobs. We don't know where those jobs are. I will tell you, we don't even know what they are. We're preparing them for jobs that may not even at this stage exist. So these are the things that I really value, the work and the thought that went into that kind of approach being included in this document. I really do appreciate that work.
We will be hosting a reception in your honor on May the 2nd. Is that right? Somewhere around there. Sometime in May. Okay. At our first board meeting, we're showing our appreciation to all of our community members that have volunteered to serve. So you will be recognized at that time too. So thank you for taking the time. And Jim, thank you for your leadership with this group and any others that participated in this process. Okay, so on our next section of the agenda, we're moving to a report section. So we're not going to be voting, but we will be listening to reports and providing feedback and asking questions. So at this point in time, our first report will be a compensation plan update to be followed by a discussion of insurance. So Dr. Matthew Gutierrez, our Assistant Superintendent for Employee Services, will introduce the presentation of the annual employee compensation study. Dr. Gutierrez, please.
Good evening. I'd like to introduce our compensation plan update presenter, Ann Patton, who is our TASB HR consultant, and she has been working with us over the last couple of months. Not only HR, but also with finance, Steve, who has provided input during this process, and she is going to outline some options that we have as we're looking at our compensation plan. I do want to make a just point of clarification, because there have been a couple of questions, because this presentation does look a little bit different from last year or in previous years. In the past, you've received two documents. You've received a handout, and then you had the presentation. What we decided was to make this a little bit easier to understand and grasp, because it is a lot of information, and compiled everything into one document, that being the PowerPoint presentation. So some of those charts and graphs that you're accustomed to seeing on the handout are included in this presentation. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ann Patton.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be back in front of Plano ISD. It's always a pleasure. This is about the third year that I've worked with you. Prior to that, Dr. Atkinson worked with you for many years, and this is an annual review. We took a look at all of your staff and payroll costs at first. You have right now about a $339 million budget with 6,896 employees, which was the download that you gave me as of last fall. This is a count of employees. This is not FTE, so a part-time person is going to count as a person, not an FTE. Doesn't include overtime, doesn't include benefit contributions. This is just base salary. Okay. But what I think is significant about this is that you have the total 67.5% of your total cost of your salaries goes to 60% of your staff, which is your teachers. So you're really putting your money where your priorities are. So that's quite evident here. So that is a very good thing. It's something to be congratulated for. This year, when we took a look at the market, and just as a background, we conduct a salary survey of all the school districts in the state of Texas. We've done so for about 30 years. In the past, we have looked at several school districts that are outside of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, outside the Dallas area, including some in Fort Worth, one in Austin, a couple in Houston, and really kind of questioned, where are you really competing for talent? So the HR folks here, Ms. Melvin, Ms. Strotman, actually did a study saying, where did we actually lose, which districts did we actually lose teachers? Who do we really compete for talent with? So we changed the market to not include those other school districts, but to look at who you're really focusing on. Where do you lose, who did you lose your teachers to? Which unsurprisingly was pretty much in this area. You're not going to Fort Worth, you're not losing them to Katy, they're not going to Northside, they're staying around here. So this is the list of, this is 2 years of Plano ISD employees leaving for the other area districts, and they've given you a list of the number of employees in which school districts that they went to. Now, I do not know why. Usually teachers, if they leave, it may be that they live in these areas, and so they can stay closer to home. They can teach closer to where their own kids go to school. There's a variety of different reasons, and I'm sure there's probably been, exit interviews conducted so that the HR folks here can give you more information about maybe why. This is the list. I just wanted to inform you that we kind of shifted from looking at other areas of the state to really kind of concentrating on who you compete with around here.
Can I ask you a quick question on that?
Sure.
Do you happen to know where we would stand of hiring people from other districts? I mean, I think that would be maybe next year to include that. I'd like to know what it looks like with us taking people from other districts.
I think that's a really interesting question. I think that's something that would be a really but I think that that would be something locally that they would be able to get. You may know off the top of your head, I don't. Okay.
And I
And
think
if
part
I-
of that, oh,
Go ahead.
was it?
If I can add, just add to that, if we can put them side by side, so we'll know that we lost 44, last year we lost 44 teachers to Frisco ISD and 59 to this year, but we got 63 teachers from Frisco ISD and so on, so we'll kind of know where we are in the balance.
I think, June, it's gonna look kind of similar to this, isn't it? I mean, as I walk through our schools and because we had, I think 75% of our employees this year that we hired had experience somewhere else. And it's not a surprise that they're coming from a lot of these districts, so
Yeah, I
it
think
goes.
The value in that is that, just looking at this makes it look like people are leaving our district.
Right.
When in fact, we are also recruiting people from other districts.
Correct.
And so I'd like to know kind of where the balance is.
Okay.
Well, and one more piece of information on that report would be great to know if they had been in Plano before and are returning.
All of that
Oh,
data
yeah.
is readily available to
Okay.
share.
Certainly, gather all that and share it. Really, the purpose of asking Candace to do this is to let you know that we did change our peer or comparison districts and the reason behind that.
Oh, I like this.
Yeah, I was very pleased
Yeah.
with this. I kind of stepped in new into some pretty big shoes to fill a couple of years ago, but it's kind of like, are you looking at Round Rock, Which, this is, I mean, I'm from the Dallas area. I mean, I was born and raised here in the Dallas area, so I kind of know you a little bit. So I was very pleased with the discussions and that we had some concrete information on specifically which districts you wanted to look at and not just anecdotal information. So-
Yeah, and there was a time too where there was a huge difference between salaries in the state of Texas, where now it's pretty close except for the Austin area. When you look at San Antonio and Houston and DFW, the compensation is fairly close, where 10, 15 years ago it was different. And so now we really felt strongly about just focusing on our real competitors, and those are the districts that surround us.
On the next page is, I promise, these are the only long numbers we're going to make you look at tonight. But this is basically a sample out of our salary survey. We survey for teacher salaries in 5-year increments. Now, you do not have, and this is what they reported as their pay schedules. It is sorted from highest paying starting salary of these 16 to lowest paying starting salary. You do not have a step schedule, and you haven't for years. You have a pay range. So what we did 2 comparisons for you. One is the actual average of your current employees, and then the average where you're hiring. So I wanted to see, how are you hiring your new people in, and what do your current people look like? So those are kind of 2 different questions that we're going, and it looks terrific. You're in the top, your starting salary is above the 75th percentile, which is that top dotted line, the orange line. The green line is the median, or the 50th percentile, and the blue line is the 25th percentile. Dallas is highlighted. They have a very, very different compensation plan for their teachers, so I highlighted them so that just to bring your attention to them. They don't have a step schedule either, but their hiring practices are quite unique, and they have performance pay, and they have a quite different compensation plan. But this looks terrific, and I just am always pleased to be able to stand in front of a board and say, congratulations, JU, this looks terrific, and I honestly don't always get to do this, so it's kind of a banner evening for me as well. You all look great. You just look great. But we want to continue that. I know that you have made, in the past few years, significant financial dedication to increasing these salaries for your teachers, and you've done a great job, and the board's commitment shows here.
So if I could just highlight something, Ann, on this page, just point out that this doesn't happen by accident. It's a strategic decision that this board and previous boards have made to make sure that our teachers, from a salary point of view, are in the top quartile. And this report shows us that at this point in time, we are in that category. So I just set that out there as just confirming what we set out to do, we've done. And we, it's taken some time because it didn't happen overnight, but it will take a commitment to stay there.
Everybody asks me, all of your friends and neighbors and people around the state, everybody asks me, what is everybody else gonna do? I will go ahead and we'll just address that elephant in the living room right now. I don't know. This is a legislative year, and so salaries are, sometimes people wait a little bit longer in a legislative year. The other, it's a little bit early. But because I work in the Dallas-Fort Worth area a lot, I have no reason to think that these salaries are not gonna shift up. They have every year, and I have no reason to think they're not going to. Now, exactly how much is gonna depend on the district and what their resources are. But I have no reason, several years ago, I think it was 11, 12, in the bad old days when nobody was giving any pay increases, I'm not seeing any of that. So I have run a couple of scenarios for you, like I do every year, and given you cost estimates, and have reviewed them with Mr. Fortenberry. And if you want other scenarios, we could certainly do that for you. But I don't see any stopping this. I remember being surprised when starting salaries jumped to $40,000 a year. So, now it's entertaining. So, you all have made a significant commitment, and I know that I've been working with you over the past few years to kind of work you there. It's not something that you can just do overnight, because this is 60-something% of your staff. So, making big increases here can be extremely expensive. So doing it over a period of time and being strategic about it is a way that you should continue to operate. You've done a great job so far, and I recommend that you continue doing
Well,
it.
and for our audience too, if they were here last meeting, and where else would you be, really? But, Mr. Fortenberry provided that we are above the state average in our instructional, the dollars that we spend and we are below in everything else. So it's not just about, like, we've been committed, and previous boards, previous superintendents committed to being able to try to be aggressive in that salary structure. We're also very prioritized in what matters ultimately in our world. So I want to make that point as well.
Well, you've done it. It's like I said, you've done a very good job, and I will continue to support you and do whatever I can to continue this trend, because it looks great. It just looks terrific.
Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and skip. This is just a graph of the slide that was on the previous page, and I want to go ahead and skip over to one of the things we did look at is I always look at the experience of your newly hired teachers, librarians, and nurses. You all give me all of their experience so I can tell who's new to the district and how many years of experience, total experience that they have. So according to the data that you sent me, 37% or 154 teachers were brand new baby teachers. That is about 37%. However, you have, and this is consistent with last year, and this is also a philosophy of wanting to hire teachers with a little bit more experience, not necessarily hire all brand new ones. And so you have got 68 or 16% had 6 to 10 years, 34% or another 143 came with at least 1 year, 1 to 5 years of experience. It starts tapering down at 11 to 15. This is pretty typical, once teachers get, embedded in their community, and they're not as likely to jump around quite as much once they get more mature in their profession, as we say. But your new teachers you do have some new teachers, but you have philosophically wanted to hire teachers with more experience in that, and you've succeeded in that.
So just, do you look at something like this for other districts?
I do.
So we were at 30% roughly with 6+ years of experience of new hires. How would that compare to other districts?
I think that's probably a little bit low, just anecdotal, just in my head, a little bit lower. It also kind of, to be fair, depends on the district. Like a big fast-growing district that has schools to fill, you're gonna see that blue piece of pie be a lot larger. But you and some other school districts have strategically thought, I really want to hire teachers with a little bit of experience. to be fair to the other school districts, they've got different needs. Some of them have quite different needs, so. The 5% with 16 or more years of experience, that is fairly typical. Usually those people, not all by any means, but usually when they jump with more than 16 years of experience, they usually bring to the table special skills. You're going out recruiting them. Band, orchestra, foreign language, coaches. Those are your really, it looks like you're kind of hunting some of these specialized folks out with those experiences. So. This is a different chart than you've seen in the past, and one that I actually kind of like better than the one we've been showing you in the past. This is a histogram of all of your teachers and their years of experience. So it counts the number of teachers in each year of experience up to 30 years. The median year of experience is 10 years. It is the same as it was last year. So that's been your experience level. Statewide is about 11. So your experience level of your teachers is pretty close to the state average. But you can see, one of the reasons I like to look at this is because you can see that you've got a kind of a spike of 30+ year teachers, and then you have some more in the 26 to 30. Now TRS tells us teachers tend to retire around 30 years, at around 30 years. So knowing that you've got some teachers that could potentially be cycling out of the system and retiring, and your hiring practice is to try to fill these positions. Remember on the previous chart, like 1 to 10 years, that makes it even more crucial to keep your salary schedule and keep that pay range up so that you can hire who you need. Like I said, you have a pay range. You are not tied to years of total credible years of experience, and you use that range. And that's, you want to hire the best and the brightest in certain areas. You have the flexibility to do that. So the budget impact models, I ran 2 scenarios. Both of them have a teacher starting salary of $52,000. That would be your entry rate. With a 3% general pay increase, that's a little over $1,600 for each teacher, nurse, and librarian. The total cost for all employees, doing a 3% on the midpoint, is about $10 million. For 2% is about almost $1,100 general pay increase for your teachers, and that's about a $6.8 million budget impact. As I said earlier, if something happens or something, our friends in the legislature do something, we can certainly run other scenarios for you at the board's request. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Okay.
I wanted to make a quick comment for us as a board. I looked at the numbers, the 25th percentile. The difference between the 25th percentile and the 75th percentile is 2%, $1,000. The difference between the median and the 75th percentile is $250, so which is 0.5%. I'm not saying it's not important, and I think that there is a lot of value in knowing that what we offer is in the 75th percentile or the top quartile, and I know that we do that, but we need to also make sure that we emphasize that there are other reasons why teachers want to be here, and that we don't lose sight of that. In my own personal research, even though it wasn't in the education space, it was in the technology space, there are other reasons beyond salary why people would choose one place over another. Those $250 difference can go away on gas expenses over the year because you're going to one district over another. Let's just make sure, and I'm not saying we're not, that all the other reasons why teachers come here are still focused for us.
That's a great comment. I think in someone coming in new and joining the district, I feel that there are a lot of reasons that teachers join Plano beyond the compensation. That's a factor, but just the culture in Plano has a reputation, and when you go to a recruiting fair, I remember being on the other side looking at the Plano table and the long line of teachers just excited to try to be a part of Plano, and it's because of the resources that are available, that culture of collaboration, the investment in professional learning, the curriculum that is written by teachers. I think there's a lot more that goes into it than the compensation alone.
And I remember my first class in my MBA studies that one of the professors said something very insightful. He said, we might be number one right now, given the lines. He said, we're number one and we still have time to fix it. So we just need to make sure that we keep our eye on the target and make sure that whatever reasons people choose Plano over any other district, those reasons remain and increase.
Okay,
Actually, that was one of the reasons why I wanted to know how many people are coming from other districts to our district. Is
Yep.
because if the number is significantly higher of people leaving us to go to another district than other people coming in from other districts to us, that's a red flag. And so I think it's valuable for us to see that information. And then also, you know, in the, we've talked in the past about the number of applicants we have and the number of people who, when we go to these recruiting fairs, who want to come here. I mean, that too says something about people wanting to be here and that reason being something more than salary. So, you know, that's all part of the big picture.
It is, and we can again get that information to you possibly in the Friday update so that you can have that comparison data rather quickly.
Continuing our conversation about compensation, there's another component to compensation, and that has to do with insurance benefits. So Dr. Gutierrez will now introduce the employee insurance benefit update.
I'd like to welcome our Director of Benefits and Risk Management, Sandra Fida, who is going to provide the presentation on our benefits package.
Thank you so much. We so appreciate the time tonight. As I was listening and hearing the culture of Plano and hearing band moms and choir, and all my children went through Plano, and I feel this indebtedness as well to Plano, just the culture that we have, and now being part of this department, we strive really hard to do everything we can to make sure that we're providing the very best for our employees, as we value. Those are our resources to helping our students. So thank you so much for the time, and we want to just give you a brief update. There's a few changes this year with TRS, and probably you've been following that as well. And with the new laws that are coming in with ACA. And so I want to just, some of the slides are similar to what you have seen in the past, but I'm going to expand a little bit more as well tonight and give you some more input. This first slide is one that always shows the eligible number of employees that can take the district contribution for our TRS active care premiums, and that's 6880. We actually, out of that number, have 4592, 66.7%. Last year it was 67%. So there's a slight change this year. We have a total of 7,000 plus employees. So it kind of gives you an idea of how many people actually take the insurance with us. A lot of times what happens is, you know, people have their spouse or other forms. So that's one of the things that we note. This next slide, last year, if you'll recall, we were kind of holding our breath because we thought that we were going to get just have this big increase, and they held us steady. We didn't have any increase. We stayed with the HD plan at $82, and the next year it was $82, and we were really surprised. This next year, they have not determined yet. There's some changes going on at TRS, and they are in discussion mode, and I'll expand in the next slide, but this just notates that 2 years in a row we stayed steady on the plan that is highly utilized, and that's the HD, Active Care HD. So we know that TRS is in discussion with some new changes, and those do not typically come out till June, unfortunately. I don't know why they wait till the last minute when districts are trying to make decisions about compensation and such, but that's what they do. So likely, it's just, I think, a very foregone conclusion that there's probably going to be a rate increase this year, since there wasn't in the last two. But we can't say with certainty. So this is just an overview. I wouldn't want you to spend a lot of time, but kind of gives you what plans we have, what everybody's enrolled in, the combination of everybody. The district pays the contribution for full-time, and that is if you work 63% or 5 days. These numbers are pulled as of February. I want you to notate that this 4,592 employees that was notated on page 1 doesn't add up here, because we actually have some employees, some subs, that take our insurance, and they just pay the full premium. They don't get the district contribution, they just pay the full premium, so we allow that. And some other part-time employees, and then a court-ordered situation is on this graph. So that's why the numbers may not add up to the exact numbers on page 1. So I just wanted to notate that for you. This is always the question at hand, because state requires that we pay $225. That's the requirement. For years and years and years, Plano's paid $259. So that is $14 million plus dollars for the employees that enroll. We haven't changed that $259 for a while. We've been paying that for a long time, where the state just requires that we pay $225. So we've paid more for a long time. We bring this slide up, and I know you see this all the time, and we can kind of help talk through this a little bit as well, but for every $10 of increase in premium that you provide an employee, it's $500,000 in budget impact, which is always amazing to me, but that's just how it, even just $10, what the impact is. So we like to share that with you so it can help you kind of make some decisions. This chart actually shows, and it kind of brings up some of the discussion y'all were having about some of the other school districts. We notated that 4 school districts did increase their contributions this year, and they all are listed. And I do want to notate that you see us near the bottom. That's the same place we were last year. A couple items that I do want to highlight is that a lot of times we will have parent or teachers call us, employees, and say, why don't we get more for our benefits? And a lot of times what we point out to them is that our district pays a lot more at a starting salary for this teachers, nurses, counselors. So in that grouping, we are a higher paying district than a lot of places where they're coming from or going to. And so when we tell them the entire package and we say, well, where did you come from? Well, they start at 48,000, we start at 51,000. So we'll help them sometimes see the entire package. They go, oh, but that's for that grouping of teachers, nurses, counselors. I don't know exactly where all we stand with the paraprofessionals in terms of salaries, and so that's a lot of times, though, we will explain that the total package is that we have a higher starting salary than a lot of other districts. So that kind of helps give an overview there, but we do know there is probably a grouping of people that are paras, and we don't know exactly the starting salaries for those individuals like we do the teachers.
Well, and just to put a point on that is very much intentional.
Yes.
And we have had this conversation numerous times over the years about putting money into salary versus putting money into benefits.
Yes, exactly. And you know, that's a lot of times what we'll say to people is, over the long haul, if you have a salary increase, that's going to be ongoing. You know, and so sometimes it's just a discussion and they go, oh, okay. And you know, it's perception, I think, at times. You know, they go, well, we're at the bottom. Well, yeah, but when you look at the compensation that we're at the top. So you kind of have to help them through it sometimes with the total picture of where we are. So that's a great point there, and that's a lot of times what we tell people. Now, you know, with the paras, we don't always know exactly what their compensation was earlier, but we can talk a little bit to that. So this year, unfortunately, TRS is making some changes, and they have submitted Senate Bill 789, and it's been filed. And basically what they're saying is they're going to kick us out, or any districts that have 1,000 employees or more, from the TRS active care insurance process. And they have said that it could be the 18-19 plan year. So that's kind of what we're looking at. However, we do know that one of the CEOs from Fort Worth went down to one of the board meetings and got some information. And basically what they told him is, you know, these are early stages. We don't really know. We're still in discussion, you know, all those kinds of things. So it's in committee, and that they'll decide in June. So that will be a problem if Senate Bill 789 really passes, because then we fall into that 1,000 plus employees category, and we will have to make a new decision. So right now, my department, and I give the information, but I don't even feel like I can take the credit, because I just have this incredibly great team who gathers, talks to the employees. They just do a phenomenal job, and I do want to point that out, as Nikki is our coordinator for this area, and Nancy is here as one of our HR specialists, and they do the phenomenal work. I just get to be the one that gets to share the information. So I want to thank them, because they're the ones that really put in the information time and collecting. But basically what we have started doing as a team and as a department is collecting all the data. We're looking at every option. If this does pass, what will we do? And so we're not just sitting idly by. We're making, you know, talking with our consultants, collecting data, looking at if we had to do an RFP for insurance, what might that look like? You know, if we had to do self-funding, what might that look like? There's just so many things that would go into it. So we're already doing some benchmarking and looking at every option possible that would be out there, and already attending webinars and gathering information. So if it does occur and the bill does pass, it is a very lengthy process. I will say that, and to go through an RFP and to bid and all those kinds of things. And typically when you go out for bid, an insurance company is not going to want to bid unless 2/3 of your employees are on board. So there's a lot of things we're learning and finding out. but this may not pass. This may not even, happen. So, but we aren't sitting around and just waiting. We're actively doing things right now. So
What is their motivation for that? Is it a cost saving for the state?
it's all about money. It always comes down to. The money is the driving force, and even with the retiree insurance, they're looking at some changes as well. So, if you recall, it used to be when TRS, once you got in, it was irrevocable. You couldn't get out. Now they're like, well, we might kick you out. And we're like, wait a minute. When we got in, you said this was irrevocable, but so it's really all about the financial aspect of it. So
It's irrevocable to us.
yeah, exactly. And we're like, this doesn't seem right, So
I've looked at the history on that. It's in committee. It was referred to committee on February 22nd, so it's been there 3 weeks. And there's not a companion filed in the House, a companion
No funds, no.
bill, yeah. But we do need to monitor this, and I think make it clear to our senator that we probably don't like this.
I might add, this particularly right now would be a terrible time for them to do that, because there's so much uncertainty in what the marketplace would be with the Affordable Care Act apparently maybe soon to go away to be replaced
Yes.
by something else. There's just so many unanswered questions. If they are doing that for money, it seems like it'd really be leaving a lot of districts with a complete unknown as to what would happen, and lots and lots of employees and their dependents.
David, who's the author of that bill?
Huffman, Joan Huffman. I don't know where she's from.
I think we gave some feedback on this bill. Was it this one or some other, maybe it was the
There was
retired teacher?
feedback given on this bill
There-
specifically.
There was.
There was?
Yeah, that's what I thought. I know I got a request and
Yes.
you looked into it.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's where there were some concerns on the impact that this was gonna have on
Yeah.
those who have retired, on their benefits, which you mentioned.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, with that uncertainty that Mr. Fortenberry indicated, that could yield higher costs to districts. We don't know. But if TRS is trying to save money, they're really, maybe in the long run, costing districts and the state more and really impacting.
They really, and it's hard to know with TRS. They'll do things sometimes and say, I mean, we've had them implement, okay, we're gonna do it this school year. And we're like, whoa, I mean, and they'll do things like that. But I think that, like you were saying, that this is gonna impact a lot of people, a lot of school districts. So I'm hoping they take a lot of time and consider, and I think they will, but it's just hard to know. And like you were saying, Steve, it's just, there's a lot of unanswered questions, and we'll know in June when they make a decision. And we're watching all the meetings and
But they can't do anything unless the legislature does something first.
Right, it has to
It
pass.
requires, so it's gonna have to move through the Senate, the House is gonna have to agree, so we'll know actually by the end of May.
Yeah.
With, at the close of session on by May 29th, we'll know
Yeah.
whether anything happened or not.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the compensation that the board, y'all have done so graciously the last couple of years, given this lump sum to everybody that had been here for the year and was still employed as of November 30th. And so this was, I think, one of the, as you were mentioning in the past, this gave everybody something. And just a reminder that that was what we have done in the past, and I think people appreciated it. I know that a few times we would get people that would call and say, when do we get our bonus? And we'd be like, there's no bonus. It's a free and generous lump sum set, gift. So don't think of this as forever. We don't know if that'll be, you got it this year. So this was something that we've decided, I know in the past years to do. And we also have tried to remind people that this could have been something you could have put towards your benefits if you wanted. But if you didn't have benefits, you could put this towards something else. And so I've tried to give some education in that regard. And that may be something that we could consider even this year, and maybe the perspective of it, or the perception of what it might be used for in terms of, if you did something like this would be used for benefits, or I don't know, there's some options that maybe you could consider with if something like this were considered again. I just wrote down, it was something I gave everybody something last year. We really dispelled, it's not a bonus when they would call. Perhaps maybe we could rephrase it and say this is towards your benefit package or something like that. It's something to consider. As we were talking just a moment ago, the Affordable Care Act, which is now moving to repeal and replace, this is very complicated. And so this chart, basically what it's saying is that our biggest exposure, we offer insurance to every single person. Everybody gets offered insurance, which reduces our exposure to that large fine that y'all heard about. Like, our exposure is gone because we offer it to everybody. Our biggest exposure is the subs that we have. What happens with the subs is that at this point, the district has decided that we would pay any penalty that we might incur because it's much cheaper than paying the district contribution for all these subs. I will say this, that Nikki made a little notation, and I think she was saying that even if a fourth of these subs, and what would have to happen is they would have to say, go to the marketplace and say, I didn't have affordable care, and they would have to get approved and subsidized, and we could get penalized. Well, it's very unlikely that's going to happen, but even if just a fourth of those people went, our exposure would be about $80,000. Nikki and I have received about 20 or 25 letters of people who have gone and said, I don't have affordable care, I didn't get affordable care, and we disputed it, and we've won half of them because they did have affordable. They were actually employees that said they didn't, and so we disputed it, and we won 10 of them, and the other 10 were, okay, maybe they did get a subsidy, but, so that kind of tells you that but I will say this, we haven't gotten any, I mean, there could be a formal penalty at some point, but we haven't received that, and we dispute the ones we get. We got a stack a few months back with employees' names that did not match, and they were like, these don't match. Well, when we went through them, they had disposed or transposed social security numbers. So when we would look them up, maybe somebody got married or something. So a lot of those we got corrected. So we did the detail for them and got us back on track. But basically, this just kind of gives you an overview of this substitute situation, and it's a complicated equation, but we always like to just share this with you.
Sandra, I have a question on that. So it's a penalty of $282.50 per employee per month if
Yes.
they meet the eligibility?
If they were to get the subsidy, so that means they would have to go out and be approved and say, yes, you did not have affordable care. But the thing about it is a lot of our subs are either retired and on TRS retirement, or they're on their husbands, or they're on Medicare, or they're on Medicaid. So when we really looked at all of them, we found that most of them had other forms of insurance. So there's very few that we would really even have exposure to because they had other forms of insurance. And with the Affordable Care Act being repealed and replaced, I don't think this is going to be, we just got this reporting down really well, and it was really complicated and like all these boxes, and I'm like, we'll have to do a new, but we'll get it figured out. Nikki's team did a great job doing that, so. And we actually were one of the districts that got ours in ahead of time. I mean, they actually gave an extension. We didn't take, we got ours done. We were, I like to brag on them a little bit, so. This is likely not even gonna be an issue, but, by next year, I think this will probably be a different look, so we'll see what happens, with this. And then the last, slide, is basically, sharing that with the contributions that we give, and if the premiums go up, as it stands right now with the affordable care, we are required to provide affordable care to employees. And really the bottom line is, if the premium is below $125.97, we're affordable for our lowest paid employee. So right now, the premium's $82.
Right.
So we got a lot of space to go, because $82 is what the premium is for an employee, and as long as we stay below $125.97, then we're affordable for our lowest paid employee. I don't think they're going to increase the premiums to $125 this year, but I guess that's always possible. But I highly would doubt that would happen.
Now,
So.
you don't have to consider that you don't contribute the 259 to the. To the. Did I cause that? I'm sorry. We don't contribute the $259 a month to the substitutes, correct?
Correct.
So you don't have to worry about, this is just a full-time employee you have to do that
Right.
calculation on.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Yes. So we have to, for our employees, we have to provide affordable coverage. And right now, since we're our lowest paid employee, as long as we stay under the $125.97, we provide affordable coverage. So we're good. And I think this will change too, in the next year or two. So, so that's kind of the overview of the insurance situation. I know I wish I had more favorable news, and it could be that the TRS, it does turn out okay, but we've been keeping June abreast of all these things, and letting her know we're moving ahead and looking into it, and not waiting, but do want to let you know that these are possibilities, but we're also looking at all the options. So I know that's part of your decision in making decisions with compensation, and I know it's always a difficult combination, in our goal is to help and do anything we can. We interface with these employees every day, and just hear their stories and see what's going on in their lives, and it's just an amazing thing to watch, and we are privileged and honored to be able to be a part of that, and we just are thankful that we are able to help them be the very best that they can, because we know they're on the front lines and teaching children and making a difference. So does anybody have any questions or anything we can?
I would like to ask the board a couple of questions about this topic so that it's helpful to administration when they come forward with budget figures. So for a while, we've taken what funds we have and we've put them into salary for the purpose of benefiting the employee and their, a third of the employees don't use the insurance. So it benefits, the money we have benefits all people, not just those who take insurance. And it helps all of them also for retirement purposes down the road. So I just want to touch base about that strategy and see if the board feels like that is still the desired approach, or if you want to consider any difference in priorities with regard to monies that we have. So there are, there's the salary money. Each 1% is worth about $3.3 million. Then there's the $500, which is about $3 million. We can spend, it differently. I just want to touch base with you and see if you are feeling like you want to continue doing the same strategy, or if you want to have any conversation about packaging that slightly differently.
Well, I might make a comment before we make a decision there. I was approached by a teacher the other day who knew this was going to be on the agenda, and she's a single teacher. She doesn't have the option to have a spouse's potentially better plan to join. And I wonder if there's anything we can do to help our unmarried teachers. I don't know if that's even an option, but she brought that to my attention, and I didn't even think about that lack of choice that they have when they are not, don't have a spouse's plan. That's just something I don't know about, but thought I'd bring up.
Is that the employee plus children option? I mean, in our plan, I
That
think
should be
there's
the employee plus children. Actually, the employee plus children is a good rate.
Yeah.
If you compare it, you see the employee plus spouse, whichever program you take is close to almost employee plus family, but employee plus children only is dramatically lower than that.
Well,
They
this
really want their
particular-
spouses to be on their own, like, they're, just what you're saying, they are encouraging
Yeah.
you to be on yours and your spouse to be on theirs.
Well, the scenario I was explaining was no children. She's just unmarried
Yeah.
and just having a hard time working 3
Well,
jobs to get
her
by.
premium should only be $82.
But her
Oh.
deductible is $6,500.
Yeah.
So that brings the whole. I was thinking about that when I looked at the numbers, and the numbers are very similar to what you see in other places. So we're not benefited in any way. If you just think of a teacher with $51,000 a year before tax, and now you have that teacher cannot support a family with health insurance because that teacher would have to pay anywhere between $1,000 to over $1,300
Yeah.
a month. That's $12,000 to $15,000 a year
Yeah.
before copay and deductible. And deductibles today are, for a family, they're anywhere between $8,000 and I've seen $13,000, $14,000. So half of that salary goes not to die and not to be sick.
Yeah.
It is. And it's sad.
It's a hard, because we do have, like even some of our paraprofessionals, their salary goes to benefits. I mean, it's a hard balance, and I know, even I've been on our insurance, and my husband took a new position, and it wasn't much different. Like his was kind of the same. So I know that they all vary so much, but with the TRS situation, there is, if we have to go out for bid, it could be better, it could not, I don't know. It's just gonna be one of those things if that happens. And in the meantime, we'll have to wait and see what TRS decides. And if they do change or increase rates, that's a problem, I know, for a lot of people. And that's a good point that you bring up, in that, insurance is one of those necessities, but it's like you say, you just have it to, and it's a hard thing to do, so.
So, on the $500 one-time payment that we're providing, and we have for a few years now, are there other districts that do anything like that?
Not that I know of.
That you-
Do you know?
There are-
Are
There are
there?
some.
Okay.
There are some other districts.
Okay.
We've had a few days to look at a few. Obviously, many are on spring break, but there are districts around us like Allen, Little Elm, McKinney, and Wiley has done it. Except for this year, they've done the retention stipend.
So what I'm wondering, I mean, I just made this note to myself, how long is it sustainable not to put more money into insurance? I mean, you mentioned, maybe for a particular type of employee, we have a little room there, but I'm just wondering from a practical point of view, could we use that 500 in a flex way so that the employee could direct it I want it lump sum, I want it applied to my premium, distributed over the course of the year. Is that something, or is it just all one way or all another way?
Well, I don't know, I think that would be an issue on how to do, I think one option is to make that 500 look as, we're gonna give this 500 to go towards your benefits if you wanted to, or you can go towards, like, you just give it, but you say it in that we're giving you as this part of your benefit package. I don't know how, if it
From a
could be flexed
distribution point of
around
view,
or.
could the employee choose to receive it in a one-time fashion or in a distributed fashion? Is that possible?
I want to point out that 500 isn't for every employee, it's when you're new hire.
You don't get that.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah, you have to be here
It's not
that year.
permanent either.
And
Yeah.
if you're less than 100%, you get a
Okay.
portion of that, so it's
Okay.
not every.
So if you're looking at, if you're also looking at recruiting, I think now, as you've noticed, districts are starting to contribute a little more. That is something that people are paying attention to.
Mm-hmm.
And folks who are hired new to the district don't qualify for that $500.
Okay.
And you had to be here through November 30th.
Okay.
I think a question would be if there is any way that we can provide $500 that would be worth more to the people getting it. Or we provide, the example I will give you is if I worked for HP and I have a printer and HP, instead of paying me $500, gave me $500 worth of ink at their cost, it would be worth more than $500 to me. So is there anything that we can provide that would cost us $500 but would be worth more? And I don't know if there is something like that.
I think it would vary. I think you hear both sides where there are those who prefer to get that sum of money at that time of year, and those who would prefer to have it divided up to be allocated towards monthly benefits.
Right, but to Mrs. point, if you give them the option, say you can take 500 now, or we can apply more than 500 if we can make it work financially into your into your health plan.
Well, are they subject to health savings accounts? Do they have those?
We do
Because
have-
then that's pre-tax, correct?
Deductible would be-
Yes.
So that
We do
would
have-
be the way.
That would be an
If they
example,
could
yeah.
designate it to a health savings account,
We
They
can
wouldn't
put
get-
money into your health savings account because you have a high deductible plan.
I just don't know if that's reported.
Well, let me ask the question a little bit differently, because I don't want to get into I don't
Right.
want to get into the details, but let me pose it this way. Is there an interest in continuing doing what we've been doing? Or is there an interest in exploring doing something slightly different that gives some recognition to the increasing cost of insurance and letting staff figure out what that might look like, and they can, make a recommendation. I just want to get a sense of your pulse on, are you interested in option 1 or option 2?
I'm interested in option 2 because I think we should always be looking at different kinds of ways that might improve things for our teachers.
Yep.
My philosophy on this hasn't changed. I would rather put money into salary as opposed to benefits, because it benefits all 100% of our employees as
Not
opposed to
two-thirds.
70% of our employees. And 2, as I look at I've got side by side from the last 2 presentations, this page, which are the contributions made by district, and this page, which are average salaries. And if you look at it, Prosper is number 1 on contribution, and they are at the very bottom of salaries, and even with their contributions, they don't get anywhere close to us. Rockwall, same issue. They're number 2 on contributions made. They don't get close to us on salary. And so I think, from my perspective, our money is better spent on salaries, and then you allow the individual employee to determine how they want to spend it.
I have to agree, because I think I don't want to disadvantage the employee who doesn't have to take advantage of our insurance program. I do think we should look at the $500 payment. We can't call it a bonus. And that started because we had a year or so where we couldn't make pay raises, so we felt we were a little bit behind the 8 ball. But I think that's something we need to look at carefully. I think also it's important for us to communicate very fully to our employees the full benefit package. much. I remember when I was at Texas Instruments, I got this one sheet that would say what my salary was worth, my vacation was worth, my stock options were worth, put it all on one page. And I think it's a matter of telling the truth well, so people do value the totality of it, not just try to piecemeal it out.
Okay.
I'm in favor of exploring other options. I'm again still, other industries I've seen where the difference between the 25th percentile and the 75th percentile could be a 3x. And in our case, it's 2% between 25th and 75th. So I don't know that the $500 applied into, or any other sum applied into the salary would make such a big difference. I think that exploring possibilities where we can, it's gonna cost us 500, but somehow we can apply it to something that would be worth more to you and give you the option. I would like to explore.
Well, let me be clear too, because we're talking about two separate things, in my opinion. The $500 that we're talking about is something that is discretionary on this board's part. It's not a permanent part of.
Right.
It's not a permanent part of anything. And so if we're talking about exploring other ways for that $500, I'm all for that. But where this conversation has been had in the past is when we're talking about pay raises versus a smaller pay raise and a bump in contributions for benefits, that's where the rubber meets the road in terms of what our raise is going to be. My philosophy has not changed there. As we're talking about the pile of money that's over here going towards employee salaries, I would rather not look at putting any of that money into a distribution for contributions here.
We're
Or
just
for
talking about
benefits,
the
rather.
$500 though.
He's just
I think the larger
clarifying.
picture is that we're looking at everything in totality, because we're talking about, what our benefits are for our employees, and at upcoming board meetings, we're gonna talk about salaries, and that's gotta be part of the picture.
Yeah, I think the 500 is a nice to have, and it's a morale boost, and it's something that hasn't been guaranteed every year, but I agree with you, David, that we need to make certain that the salary is where we maximize, because it's 100% of our employees and not 2/3 of our employees.
Okay, so can we wrap this up with the following, let me know if this is reflective. I know you're open to maybe even some more exploration of funding distribution than what I'm hearing the majority of others are expressing.
No, I'm up for exploration, but only for the $500.
For the $500. And you're up for exploration of everything?
I'm up for exploration of everything. I'm up for exploration of how would we, in the most affordable way, attract the best employee.
Okay, so
Be creative.
to give staff appropriate direction, I don't want to make them do work that they don't, need to do. It sounds like there are a majority of people who prefer to stick with the original plan but explore options on the 500. So I think it's only fair to ask staff to look at that when they come back. But continue to ask this question each year, does it still make sense? And that's why I wanted to have the conversation, is to see if it's still a good idea or not. Because I feel like perhaps there may be a point in time, I don't want to just keep doing something because we've been doing it.
Yep.
Right. I want to say, is it still a good idea?
Mhm.
And conditions may change, and, I'm interested, I see all sides of it, but I don't want to ask staff to do too many things that it doesn't sound like there is support to act on. So is that fair? I mean, can we all live with that? Okay, so when you come back,
We'll come back with a recommendation considering maximizing salary and also taking into consideration what we're doing for benefits currently, and looking at, because another thing that I just noticed was looking at those districts that are above us in salary, they're also above us in benefits contributions. So we just want to find a way to maximize all of that and come back with a recommendation.
I wonder if they're chapter 41.
You what?
Did they make a huge recapture payment?
I would love if we had the ability at some point to look at total compensation picture with these three component parts and compare that, because that's what you were doing, David.
Yeah.
And that's what, would be
Yep.
really the best piece of data to look at. Okay, no decisions on this, just a report and enough enough information to give you some info when you come back.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
All right, our next report is on the pre-K update and expansion recommendation. This is from Susan Modisette. Would you please introduce this report?
I will introduce it and give it.
Okay.
Thank you, Leslie. Before I start, I would just like to again recognize the work that Susanna Spina has done. She has been just the best partner to work with and an invaluable resource for our district. So thank you, Susanna. And she and Dash both are in the audience as fact checkers. So any hard questions we'll field out that way. As a quick review of this year's progress, you remember that this year we added 16 full-day pre-K classrooms at these sites with a capacity to serve 277 children. And throughout the year, we were probably within 3 or 4 of being at capacity at any one time. When we look at the actual number of students that we've served this year compared to the year prior, our growth has not been the 277 seats that we added in pre-K. You can see that obviously our Head Start numbers remain static, but the number of students that we served in our half-day programs at our early childhood schools decreased, and then we added the 277 full-day students. That is really not surprising when you think about it, because we reduced the capacity at our early childhood schools when we added 2 full-day classrooms. So they're serving 36 students in those classrooms rather than 72. So I'm not alarmed that our number of students that we serve didn't increase more dramatically than it did. This is a really hard to read graph, but meaningful graph on performance. And what we've pulled here is really just a comparison of 1 full-day monolingual classroom and 1 half-day monolingual classroom with teachers of similar experience. And the top graph shows where students came in. So we looked at where student performance was with our full-day program compared to our half-day program, and fairly evident is our full-day students came in with fewer skills than our half-day students did. And some of that could be attributed to our half-day students, could be tuition-paid students. So they may have had different experiences perhaps than our full-day students. But I think the really remarkable part of this is when you jump down to the second part and see at mid-year when we re-administered these measures, not only had our full-day students closed that gap, but in some cases even exceeded where our half-day students were. So Tammy and I had a little bit of a conversation about that, and even though this is just one class, I have to believe it's, fairly representative of what we would see across the district, and just what we observe anecdotally, that the students' growth in this short period of time has been phenomenal. This chart shows a different performance measure, and that is social emotional learning. And this is just looking at monolingual classrooms, both full day and half day. So you're not seeing the comparison that we saw earlier. and you can see where they were in the first wave and then where they were in our mid-year wave. It's important to note the white bar is the maximum. So it's not that we would expect them to go all the way to 100. The highest they could go, for example, in that first bar graph is 27. So what we can say, even though we didn't show this, is the growth that our full day students made is compared to half day, is very similar to what we saw in the prior graph. So we continue to see that our full day students are, I don't know if outperforming is a good word, but I guess it is outperforming. I mean, they're certainly, yes, they're certainly benefiting from that full day of rich instruction. This is just the next two slides are a quick summary of our work in parent engagement. And as you'll remember, that was part of both our desire and what we wanted to see in our pre-K program, but also part of the requirement of the pre-K grant. And so at these various evening events or daytime events that parents could attend, we've had 3,025 attendees, so obviously some of those are parents who went every time and are counted each time they go. And then this next slide shows just a snapshot of the collaboration that Susanna is leading with Texas A&M Commerce in the area of family engagement. And this is really looking at helping to equip families with the tools that they need to enhance and extend the learning of their children in a very meaningful way. This you have a printout of and a hard copy, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this, and then you also have a chart that gives you the background information on that may be a little bit clearer. But we spent quite a bit of time trying to collect some data that we could show compared so that it could be compared to data that Dash shared with you 2 years ago. And in 2015, when the data was shared, the students that we were looking at were sitting in a kindergarten class. And so we looked at those students and then tracked backwards, were they in a pre-K program? Since this is our first year of expansion with pre-K, we had to look at our current pre-K students because our kindergarten students haven't had that advantage of the expansion. So this is a little bit of tricky math, but so that I'll use Wyatt, which is the first school listed here as an example. So Wyatt has 61 students in their kindergarten class this year, and I'll say that when we looked at kindergarten enrollment at each campus this year compared to their projection for next year, it's very close. And so even though we're using this year's kindergarten numbers, we feel very confident that this is going to be reflective of what we'll see next year. So Wyatt had 61 students in their kindergarten class, and of those 61, 26 of them are either second language learners or economically disadvantaged. So I'm going to call that our prospective pre-K clients. Those are our students that we know would qualify for our full day program. And then out of those 26 students, if I could read that. 23% of those 26 students are currently enrolled in a pre-K program. So it's a little bit dicey because we're using this year's kindergarten numbers and information and then and this year's pre-K numbers and combining them. Now, one thing that makes this skewed is this. With our pre-K students, when they qualify for a pre-K program, we don't ask anything further. So if they come to us and are a second language learner, they qualify. We don't ask anything else. If they qualify as special ed, they qualify. So it's only until they get to the point that we need to ask, is there an economic need, an economic hardship, that we would have the information to know, are they economically disadvantaged? So when I'm showing the utilization number, that includes ELL learners, economically disadvantaged, and special ed. So the number is a little bit inflated, and that's why in this graph you can see as you get to the right-hand side, you have schools that are really, we're showing, are accessing pre-K above 100%. So in a very simple way, if a school was expected to have 5 students that were either ELL or economically disadvantaged next year, but this year we have 6 students in pre-K, we know at least one of those students is a special education student that we're counting in that number. So does that make sense?
Basically, you're looking at the trend, not the accuracy of the number of students in that category.
I don't know if trend would be, I think what we're looking at is how does the utilization for each campus, at what percentage are they accessing pre-K services of those students who could qualify? And it's kind of interesting, you know, you can see about a third of the way, a little more than a third of the way, the bars shift. The blue bars are at the top and the orange bars are at the bottom. So what's happened is where we had schools that were not utilizing pre-K at a very high rate now have, and that's probably largely because of where we placed our programs. I mean, we were intentional about, we knew we had underserved areas, and so we placed programs there. So that's why I think we see that shift.
And just to go back to some of the work that the elementary subcommittee did, we actually did some learnings from data that Dash had presented to us, that only 38% of the students who qualified in the Shepton feeder pattern were actually taking advantage of our pre-K. And so now, as Susan has articulated, since we put capacity in that quadrant, we're actually seeing utilization of that. In areas where we've not put any more capacity, we're not really seeing any change. So that's kind of the trend. We put in capacity, people learn about it, they use it. So I think that's predictive of some need.
Yeah, I agree. So this is what Tammy was referring to, and the numbers are a little bit different, but you can see this is 2015 compared to this year. So you can see really everywhere we've had increased numbers of students, which is great, but where the pockets are that are accessing perhaps at a lesser degree, that may have shifted a little bit. And again, I think that's where we've put programming.
Sort of, if you build it, they have come.
Yeah. So this is where my creative math gets even a little bit more interesting. So I've just, again, taken that data that we just looked at and said, here are the number of students that, for each high school feeder, here are the number of students that would qualify. Here's our potential clients. At Jasper, we have 177. We're currently serving in pre-K, and that would include Head Start, half-day pre-K, full-day pre-K. We're currently serving 101 of them. So we're about 57% utilization, and that means there are 76 students that are not being served. Now again, I'm going to say the numbers not being served are really a little bit larger because we've added in the special ed students and counted them. But that just gives a little simpler view of where we have some needs. And then our proposal is going to be to add for next year, 16 additional classrooms. And we're proposing adding 2 classrooms each at Weatherford and Sigler. And so on the right side, I've shown how many more students we could capture with that proposed addition next year. 2 classrooms at Mendenhall, 2 classrooms at Hager and Mitchell, 2 at Foreman, and 1 at Thomas.
Susan, can I ask a question? And I should have asked this earlier, but in the slide before, we may or may not know, do we know that the kids that at that point were currently not being served, were they on waiting lists, or
No.
these children would not be on waiting lists?
No, our waiting list, and this really makes sense for the most part. We really don't have much of a waiting list anywhere. I can't say that I think that's because we don't have students that would access. I think it's more for families that need this, that if they can't get in, they've got to look elsewhere. And so not very many families can afford to wait on a wait list. They have to go elsewhere. That would be my guess. Then in addition to the campus additional classrooms, we're looking at adding 2 more classrooms at Isaacs, 1 more at Beatty, and 1 more at Thomas. I do want to say we're watching very carefully whether we will add at Foreman and at Mendenhall, because the other interesting thing that has happened, and I can't say this is a cause and effect, but our wait list for Head Start, which we have to have, has dropped significantly. In fact, this year I think we have 2 4-year-olds on our wait list. We can't, that's mandatory, that we have to have some students on a wait list for Head Start, and it's dropped dramatically. And there's some apprehension that because both Foreman and Mendenhall are big feeders into Head Start, that if we add these 4 additional classrooms, we're going to be pulling away from Head Start. And so what our plan is currently is Head Start has launched their student recruitment earlier this year, and they began in February. And when we launch, assuming you give us the green light to do this, when we launch the pre-K full day, we will tell our families if they've already qualified for Head Start, they need to attend Head Start, that we won't be able to take them in our pre-K program. But so we look at those populations, and it certainly appears that there's need for both, that we should be able to have a full Head Start program and have this expansion. But we will just have to wait and see how many students we end up with at Foreman and Mendenhall, and we'll get back to you on that.
What is the minimum you can have on the Head Start wait list?
Well, it must be just 1, because we have 2 this year. But I know Tina has said, I'm being kind of tongue-in-cheek, but I think it is just, there has to be a wait list.
I think it has to be 50.
Can't be too much, because we only have 2 this year and our 4-year-old.
We didn't start out with 2 though.
I'm sorry?
We didn't start out this year with 2, did we?
On our wait list? I'm not sure, I just, that's, yeah, so I was gonna just clarify that this is 4-year-olds, so, and Susanna, you might wanna speak to this, or Jim. I mean, one of the things we could do with Head Start is look at expanding our 3-year-old program. That has some financial implications for us. And so we've not really gone in that direction at this point.
But a 3-year-old can be on the Head Start wait list, can't they?
Oh, we do have 3-year-olds, yes. Our wait list is longer than 2. It's just there are only 2 4-year-olds.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I was trying to kind of compare the 4-year-olds to this
So
4-year-old.
this is a requirement of Head Start that we have a wait list?
Yes.
Okay. I guess one concern, not concern I have, but one thought I have is, I mean, we are implementing a successful pre-K program, and I would hate to have to tell parents, you're in this neighborhood around this elementary school, and we have a pre-K program where your kid can go to that elementary school, and then they're gonna go there for the next 6 years. But you can't go there, you have to go over to our early childhood center. I mean, that defies logic, but that's the
To
federal
Head Start.
government for you, yeah.
To Head Start.
Yeah, to Head Start.
Yeah.
That's, I know it's a tough puzzle, but I'd really like to be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that the board needs to consider, and I don't have that cost built into the budget that I'm going to share. It's just, I think we need some direction from you. Are we willing to take that kind of financial hit in addition to what we're going to pay for this? I do think, and this is, again, anecdotal information from our principals, being on their campus has been a draw for many families. I mean, a lot of our 4-year-olds have siblings in their school, and so they're able to ride the bus with their siblings. So there is a little bit of that. For both Foreman, I mean, it wouldn't be their neighborhood school, but Head Start is not a huge hike for them. But, I mean, that's something we'd look for direction.
We do have sort of a strategic dilemma here because we did not build our elementary schools to hold grades, pre-K through 5. And so there's some schools where we have capacity. I think Thomas is one that we have a lot of capacity. Jackson, we actually have a lot of capacity. Other schools that have need, like Mitchell and Hager, I'm pleased to see the expansion, but you're going to bring them right to their functional capacity. And so we really don't have an option at all schools to do that. So I think we're going to have to look at a blended model where if you have capacity, and even as Susan and I have talked about, it's not really great to have one pre-K classroom because then that pre-K teacher doesn't have a peer, doesn't have a colleague. Also, we don't bring to all the schools the same resources. If we only, I think, understand it as where we have the 2 classes in the current schools, they don't have some of the same learning because they don't have the indoor play area. I think the learning body ready minds, I think that was one where we don't have all the same facilities. And so I think we're going to have to look carefully at using our existing resources, but then also being open to have this blended model. We've got 3 early childhood and Head Start. We do have room at some of our schools to do something that would be of significance, and how are we going to blend all that together? I know you didn't want a co-presenter, so I've had to really try to sit on my hands. But just looking at the numbers, the chart that was given, fellow board members, look at that. If you look and sum it up, the summation's not on here, so I'll have to just give you what the number is. If you add up the number of kids in our kindergarten, it's 3,574. If you add up the number of kids in pre-K who qualify because they're either economically disadvantaged or learning English, it's 1,644 kids. So 46% of our kindergartners are either economically disadvantaged or learning English. That is a major shift for our district. So unless we bring forward with innovative things like the full day pre-K, we're not going to be the Plano that we used to be. So I think these numbers are really, really instructive about what the need is.
So Susan, you said you need kind of guidance from the board in terms of, I mean, I think this is probably a work session topic where we really need to dive in it, don't we? Or is this something we need to come to a decision and give you guidance on tonight?
No, I guess what I would ask tonight for guidance on is, if you'll remember last year, we talked with you about this same time, because if we're going to move ahead with this expansion, we really can't wait until June when the budget's finalized. So I'm kind of looking, I'd like to, at a minimum, talk about the budget and get a nod or a no as far as moving forward that way. I do think I would like at least, and I think Tammy as well, I'm sure you all would, I do think we need to take a dive into what's our next step? You know, where do we want to go, given some of the things that Tammy has just shared? You know, I think we have some challenges to look at regarding, maybe not even challenges. I think there's some factors that I would like everyone to be aware of that may be impacted as we move toward full-day pre-K that we need to do a little bit of problem solving with. And I think, you know, this will get us started for next year, but we then, I agree, would want to immediately turn around and start talking about what's the next step after next year.
I'm very excited by this, and so I actually kind of had sort of 3 points that I wanted to make based on your presentation. And the first is, does full-day pre-K work? I think the answer is a big yes, and I'd like to put that chart on the billboard across from some of our legislators' homes. It works. Second, can we afford it? And I think the answer based on this chart is yes, because we do receive the money back from recapture. It doesn't cover all of it, but it covers a significant portion of it. And if we are going to keep this district strong, we're going to have to make sure that all of our kindergartners are ready to learn, and they have all been kind of brought up to speed so they can be good colleagues with each other. And then third, do we have enough capacity to do full day for all of our kids? And the answer is no. When you look at the capacity of our our early childhoods plus Head Start, I think my number that I was able to glean was we have spaces for 1,061 kids. Well, those 1,061 kids can be 3-year-olds who are receiving special education. We have to hold capacity for kids who are going to turn 3 in that year because they get services immediately. We have our kids who are homeless, military, and so as our next step, and I'd like to do it sooner rather than later, I mean this spring, I'd like to see kind of that rack up in terms of who do we have to hold spaces for and what does that really look like. And as Susan articulated, as we switch these classrooms from being half day to full day, that takes capacity. Fortunately, our Citizens Committee did include early childhood in the bond. We've got the money, we've got land we could use, but it'd take 3 years to stand that school up. And so I would love to see as a board to go to a plan that over the next 3 years we'll move with the right processes and facilities so we can have full day pre-K for all of our income eligible 4-year-olds. If we don't start now, it's not going to happen.
Well, I think my biggest consideration is the Head Start program, and I'd like to see full day there first. And if we do that, maybe that will free up some of the other rooms, because I think that the Ready Minds program is very important.
Yeah, so I think maybe another work session might be the best place for us to dive into, because that's one of the things that we need to consider if we were to expand Head Start or our early childhood schools beyond a full day. We need to talk about teacher planning, because they won't have that, and there's no specials that kids rotate through. So those are, I don't want to get in the weeds on that, because we don't have the answer yet, but I think I just would like to share what some of the things that we'll need to look at as we move forward. And certainly, I mean, Tina's had some conversation with us about the idea of extending. She's a little bit concerned currently that, you know, Head Start now runs a shorter day than our full day pre-K, and you know, will that begin drawing families because of that? So that's something that's on our to-do list as well.
Drawing to the full day pre-K as opposed to Head Start.
Yeah.
So it sounds like there's a short-term and a long-term game plan.
Yeah.
And the short-term question right now that you want to hear from the board is, do I have your support to continue on the path to maximize the space that we have right now?
Yes.
Then I think you're asking, the board is saying we want some more information, but I'm wondering, I think you need more time to do expert study with the folks who are the experts on, I'm not the expert on this. I would like for you to visit with the people who are, to say these are the very complicated considerations with Head Start, with staffing, with location, and you know, I know you're expert at it, Tammy, but I'm not. So I would appreciate, you know, your study of it to the longer term thing to say, okay, here's what we've analyzed, and this is the game plan. And then I'd like to have a work session on that. I don't want to get in the weeds personally, and because I don't belong there. That's not my expertise.
We only have one work session left this year, if I'm counting correctly. The second meeting in April. So I would love to see the capacity wrapped up at that one.
Well, I know at the April work session, we've got a long budget meeting.
We have the class rank.
And we have the class rank report too. So that's already gonna be.
Well, in terms of your two, the short term and the long term approach, I mean, I'm supportive of this. I'm supportive of continuing forward in the short term with what we're doing. I would also like to see the long term approach. But I think this fits in nicely with what the overall plan was, which was to utilize the space we have, and then when we run out of space, then we go to another standalone facility if that's what we need. And so I see this as being all part of the long-term plan that we've talked about previously, and that we're right in the middle of it. But I think things are still progressing the right way.
So I know, Tammy, you're concerned about, the growth trajectory and having assets available to meet that demand when we've exceeded our capacity, right?
It's a 3-year process.
So, I'll throw this idea out there. So, well, first of all, generally speaking, are we supportive of the plan for the short term so that they can move forward to maximize capacity?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there you go. Now, for the longer term question, I don't know how long, everything that you've got on your playlist for the semester at hand and so forth, but could you come back to us and say, here's a reasonable time where I could come to you with some longer term ideas? And if we need to have an extra meeting to talk about just that, I'm willing to do that, if the board is willing to do that. But I would say to you, come back to us and tell us what's doable in what period of time. Is that acceptable? I know, I know you want this quickly, but.
Well, it's not quickly. I mean, it's been a long time in coming.
But I know we don't have time at the April work session. It's just already gonna be a 3 or 4 hour meeting. So I'm willing to do an extra meeting.
That's fine.
Okay? If you come back, Susan, and say, okay, I can get that done in May, okay. Or in another April meeting, we'll just schedule another meeting and do just that. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Our goal will be to bring something back by May,
Okay.
to have a plan to come back together by.
And maybe even prior to that, before you have something to make sure this is what we intend to bring in May, make sure.
That's a
'cause we don't
great
want to get to
point.
May and
And
find out there's
yeah,
something else, so.
yeah.
So I know it's important. It's important to me too. I just want to give it the time it needs, and that work session is just going to be too much. So let's just do something special. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay, we're just rolling. We're almost done.
2 meetings in one.
Okay, so the next topic is legislative update on our priorities. And what, Carla, I'm gonna ask if do you wanna talk through this, or do you want me to talk through it? Do you wanna set it up a little bit?
Let me share one thing with you for sure. You're certainly very involved in the day-to-day. In fact, mentioning that Carolyn Mobius was there testifying and such, I think you're the better person to speak to that. In regard to this report, of course, all those bills are coming in, they're stacking up, and looking at the status on that. We had promised you a legislative report at every board meeting, and so that's sort of what this is. But what I'm finding is that although we have our legislative priorities, which are very specific, and they're listed in here, is that I can't help, and maybe I'm distracted, but I can't help, I created a new category called bills of interest. So they're BOIs, as we call them. So put that in the BOI column is where we do that, because it simply relates to something that I think you care about. It may not be our stated legislative priority, but it's something that I think warrants maybe a bit more attention, and that's by my eye. It may not be everything that you would like to see, but things that jump out at me that may not absolutely fit in one of your categories I've added. We're all sort of on the watch list with this. I'm not gonna take credit for all of this myself because we're all sort of monitoring that. So Missy, I'll turn that back to you, and if you'd like to see changes in the report, I'm happy to make those edits. But beyond that, I would say you're in a position to better talk about the day-to-day.
Okay, so what we have here are the priorities that the board established and bills that relate to these, either in support of them or not in support of them, or tangentially related
Exactly.
to the topic, but not specifically.
I know that
Exactly
sounds
aligned.
not clear, but it's true.
Okay.
And that's absolutely what it is.
So I don't intend to go through each of these. This is just really for your review later. I wanted to, I guess, use this agenda posting so that we could have the opportunity to share kind of what we know about what's going on that might be, add a little color commentary, and it allows us to inform each other. So I'll start with the thing that I've been very involved with, which is the taxparency topic. And others of you have been involved too, so you can add to it. The exciting news is that we have a bill in the House, and now we have a bill in the Senate. So they're both duplicates. They look exactly alike. And Senator Taylor filed the Senate version for us. There is some additional language that Nancy crafted to expand these bills a little bit further, so we provided that language to all the parties involved. That may get incorporated through an amendment. But the other piece of good news is that the House version was assigned to a committee. Just the other day, it's going to go through House Ways and Means. So what we need to do is, we're following that legislation, and when it gets posted for a hearing, then, you know, we get notified, and then we'll be putting basically an action plan together to go and speak to the topic, and, you know, we are collaborating with other districts who are doing the same. So we'll have business folks, other trustees, PTA members and such, hopefully making themselves available to come down and testify. When we were there for Plano Days, we leveraged the opportunity while we were there, and we all went and met with different legislators to talk about this topic. And I'm so pleased that some PTA members drove down for the day and they joined us in that. Some of our chamber members did too, and we had other trustees from other school districts, so I think that was effective. And so I'm happy with the progress that's going, but we'll have to be ready to respond pretty quickly, and that's why I appreciated on this school start date bill, Carolyn was able to respond real quick, and just you have to drop everything and just go. It's kind of what happens. But I'm hopeful that, you know, we've got some momentum there. There are a couple of bills related to the property tax relief that we've been seeking. You know, we've had conversations with our own legislators asking for the flexibility to reduce our tax rate and then raise it back up if we need to a previously approved level. I'm not sure that they're softening on their position on that. That's just our delegation I'm talking about, but there are some bills that relate to that, and we continue to talk about it because that's how we think we can locally provide some meaningful tax relief, more than the relief that's been offered lately in you know, the conversations related to city and county tax relief.
You know what's interesting is on this list under the property tax relief, House Bill 15, that looks very similar to the amendment that I authored and
Yeah, so
could be part of the
right. So this may be
transparency.
a vehicle that if that moves, then that can be the vehicle that we add our stuff to.
Okay.
Okay. So Christy sent.
She's watching that.
She's watching that, and she
Okay.
sent that, and I had Steve look at it to see if that. Have he thought that would be okay, you
Mhm.
know, if we need to put our language on there.
Great minds think alike.
There you go. Brian, do you want to talk about assessment and accountability?
Yeah, well, the taxparency teams were running around Austin. I was running around to the education committee in both the Senate and the House members, and really focusing on A to F. There has been a big change there. Representative Huberty filed House Bill 22. He is the chair of the education committee. What's been reported about that is it does in fact collapse 5 domains into 3: student achievement, school progress, school climate. No summative grade, rather a grade for each of those domains, and it pushes the reporting of those grades out until August of 19 instead of 18. But really, more meaningful than that, I think, is it's an enormous shift from what was a system that was almost exclusively reliant on STAR testing to one that has become amazingly multi-metric. Sequence completion in fine arts, CTE, second language, health and wellness indicators, club and activity participation. There's a whole section dedicated to the development of survey questions, even down to greater weight for students enrolled for 4 more consecutive years. So I won't spend any more time than that, other than so much of it is as determined by the commissioner. So, you know, there's a lot of work, and the hope is, and the language that he's using is he's going to reach back out to folks in districts, and I hope to be a part of that, but we'll find out, to kind of determine how do these things all get folded into any system that that will keep A to F. But I think most people feel like this conversation had already been had with the commissioner behind the scenes. This is going to move, and it's moving in this direction. We'll just have to see how it ends up.
I saw a Texas Tribune interview with Senator Taylor and Representative Huberty a couple days ago.
Yeah.
And Senator Taylor is the author of the AWIP bill, if I recall correctly.
Larry Taylor?
Yeah. Yeah, not Van Taylor, sorry.
Right.
And he admitted that the system was flawed, and he said, I wish we had rolled this out first to school districts before adopting it, which to me.
Right, what a novel thought.
Yeah, my response was, duh.
Yeah, and when I met with Senator Larry Taylor's
yeah.
staffer, and for quite a while actually, even then, they knew it couldn't stay the way it was. So I took a lot of the things that we have tried to do, and a lot of them are right here. I mean, CTE, fine arts, survey questions, participation in clubs and activities. Those are things that found their way into this bill. They're brand new language, but now it has to be figured out how they make it part of it.
A companion in the Senate?
There wasn't last I knew, but I believe that it's forthcoming.
Okay.
The only thing I've heard potentially is the Senate may want to hang on to the summative grade as opposed to a grade for each domain, but we'll find out. I think most people feel like it will move.
Brian, I appreciate the leadership that you're providing on this topic. I know it's something that you have experience with and you feel very strongly about, and I appreciate how you've been just very collaborative with the commissioner and the legislative leadership to try to recommend how to make it better. So are there we've still got a couple of other agenda items to talk about. Is there any other legislative commentary you want to add?
Well, I just want to add, I think the reason that we push so hard on the taxparency or the transparency in taxation is that we felt like in this biennium, the legislature is not going to address the overhaul of school finance. And we know that the only way to get meaningful property tax relief is to address school finance. And so the taxparency movement, if you want to call it that, is to educate taxpayers to understand what is going on with their property taxes that they pay to the ISDs. So that was the purpose of us pushing as hard as we did. It's trying to get people educated about their taxes so that they can understand and compel the legislature to take it seriously and do that overhaul that's necessary. I know the House is working on chipping away at the edges, but it really needs to be overhauled.
Okay.
So, just one real quick, I appreciate all the work that y'all put into this, whoever prepared this.
Maybe-
Thank you, Carla. I mean, this is great to have, and, you know, the filing deadline has passed, so what's filed is filed, so now it's a matter of monitoring where things are, what looks legitimate, and what doesn't. And, you know, there are, as Missy or Nancy or somebody mentioned, there are other bills, or maybe you mentioned this, Carla.
BOIs.
BOIs, yes, there are BOIs that we also need to pay attention to.
Okay. All right, if you have any suggestions about how we can make this report better, let me know. And then we'll work with Carla to do that. Okay. At this time, Dr. Bingley will provide an update on the feasibility of a collaborative facility and program for select special education students. Dr. Bingley,
So
please.
trustees, I just wanted to let you know that we are engaged in some promising study with individuals from Allen, Frisco, McKinney, Wiley ISD, and from Children's Health about a collaborative effort to develop innovative, holistic solutions to integrate education and behavioral health, focusing on some of our high-need, emotionally disturbed and/or autistic students. I will also point out that our good friends from Abernathy, Roeder, Boyd, and Hullett have been assisting us in this as well and doing that work pro bono because they have a real commitment to what we're trying to accomplish with this for children. So I just say this, we are still learning about what that programming could look like, and we'll continue to keep you posted on our progress.
Okay, thank you. All right, last section is related to policies. At most of our regular meetings, we have policies on the agenda for the board's consideration. These policies have undergone prior review by the district's attorney and by each board member. I invite Carla Oliver to introduce these policies. Ms. Oliver.
Thank you, President Bender. We first have policy FDB local in regard to admissions. This relates to inter-district transfers and classroom assignments. So it's presented for approval under first reading this evening and will be presented for adoption under second reading at a subsequent meeting. Essentially, I'd like to just say that the staff recommends updating this language so that families who are building a home with a completion date beyond the school year are able to remain in the school of their new residence.
Okay.
I think there's a word missing there, but yeah.
Do I have a motion to approve this policy on first reading?
I move that we approve FDB local policy revision on first reading.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes unanimously. And thank you for taking care of that. Susan. It was just a difference, something that we just needed to clean up. So thank you for doing that. Next item, item B. Carla?
Thank you. FFAC regulation. This is wellness and health services in regard to medical treatment. This regulation is presented for review under first reading and will be presented under second reading at another meeting. So this is one of those things where I ask you to please acknowledge your review of this regulation with a vote to confirm that you've reviewed it.
Okay. Do I have a motion to review item B on first reading?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Second. All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Item C, which is FMG exhibit.
Yes, each of the exhibits that are listed for you there are in regard to student activities and travel. This exhibit is presented for review under this first reading and then will be presented again for second reading at another meeting. The release of liability documents contained in this exhibit have been updated to reflect changes recommended by our district's legal counsel. So many times those changes come from staff. This was one that was related to us by legal.
Okay. Do I have a motion to review item C on first reading?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. We have no public comment speakers on non-agenda topics, so with no further business, this meeting of the Board of Trustees is adjourned.